of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, your radio and online, so wherever you are, you can take us with you. These are your top stories.
Rishi Sunak is looking at raising taxes as a budget delay saves the Treasury £15 billion. The Prime Minister also wants to implement sweeping spending cuts following some improvement in the economic picture.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has completed his takeover of the social media site Twitter. It brings to an end one of the most high-profile buyout sagas in recent history.
And Northern Ireland is facing a snap election after deadline talks failed to elect a new speaker and break political deadlock.
And we'll bring you the results from our exclusive GB News People's Poll. We asked if you think Rishi Sunak is the right man for the number 10 job. Find out how you voted.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions. Please do by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk. It's amazing. I left to go on holiday with one Prime Minister in office, with everybody talking about how long can she last and people saying she'll last till Christmas. And then I've come back to a completely different Prime Minister.
Yes, and a new cabinet.
A totally new cabinet, sort of, yeah. It's astonishing what's been happening.
It's strange times we live in.
Go away for a week and the whole political climate almost changes.
A week is a long time in politics.
It certainly has been.
Well, meanwhile, amidst all of this, the Prime Minister's climate pledge is coming under scrutiny after he decided to snub COP27 amid speculation that he could extend the windfall tax on energy companies.
Well, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are reportedly drawing up plans in the autumn budget around public spending cuts and tax increases worth up to £50 billion in a bid to fill that gaping hole in the public finances.
This all comes as climate activists and MPs have been urging the Prime Minister to go further on the windfall tax as oil and gas giants see their profits grow. It doesn't even do it justice. Absolutely go through the roof.
Yeah, absolutely. Joining us now is Director of Orthodox Conservatives, Joseph Robertson, and a very good morning to you.
Morning.
It has been astonishing what's happened just in the past week, but you still have to ask who would be Prime Minister at the moment, because it seems that the challenges in his in-tray are just overwhelming.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's one thing after another, isn't it? And I think, you know, with what we've had going on with questions over the Home Office and various other issues, this is maybe some kind of slight diversion away towards things that people are actually talking about on the streets. I think the thing with the COP27 snub is potentially a good move from him. People have been polling as suggesting that net zero is certainly not number one on their list of priorities. And with what's happened recently in Sweden, I think there's a general move among a lot of voter bases to re-question whether or not the 2030 commitments are actually affecting taxpayers' bottom line unnecessarily as we sort of export our carbon emissions rather than do away with them. Essentially, all we're doing is just importing back the same number of carbon emissions at a much higher price and a much higher cost to the taxpayer.
Oh, that all sounds very confusing, to be perfectly honest. But let's talk about this £50 billion black hole. We know that Rishi Sunak, when he went through all the hustings in the summer, he wants to balance the books, right? But that is going to mean spending cuts, and it is going to mean tax rises, which on the surface of it, of course, well, the spending cuts are sort of conservative. The tax rises certainly aren't.
Yeah. I think what he needs to be really looking at is how we boost some kind of growth, certainly for SMEs and small businesses, and how we can actually grow investment in this country instead of just landing the bill back on the taxpayer. Something needs to be looked into, certainly around corporation tax bandings, for instance. Now, with a massive hike up at the top end, surely that leaves some room for growth at the lower end. You know, bringing in maybe some kind of tax banding on corporation tax to influx a new level of growth in tech startups and in other startups. He needs to be showing activity to the business community rather than just trying to foot the bill back on the taxpayer.
It's interesting as well, isn't it, that there are reports that already Jeremy Hunt has met every living chancellor in the last, 30 or 40 years or so, including Kwasi Kwarteng, but going right back to George Osborne, who, of course, brought in what's the word?
Austerity.
Thank you, austerity,
Yeah.
which doesn't augur terribly well, does it? But clearly something's got to be done. Do you think there's any chance that we're going to see austerity again?
I think so. I mean, the reality is that with rising inflation, unless this government looks at massive cuts, I mean, we're not talking 50 billion, we're talking the greatest amount since World War II spending. Unless it finds something to counterbalance that with growth, then we're looking at...
How would that manifest itself? How would austerity now affect us?
I think that the first thing we'd start to see is obviously bills going up, which we've already started to see. But that's going to filter down into the way that businesses are run, because the reality is that for a lot of people, logistics will start to be an absolute nightmare, as we already saw through the pandemic. And I think the areas that the government needs to be looking at cutting spending in are certainly on commitments to green levies and constant what we would see as metropolitan formulas for people living out in the Red Wall, for instance, who just want to see their bills go down and don't want to pay thousands and thousands on new boilers and electric cars as essentially fads for the next 15, 20 years. They're having to remodel a lifestyle while the government doesn't really listen to them and doesn't really realise that their pockets can't go that deep. So the government needs to get back in touch with ordinary people on this.
Is he the man to do that?
I don't think so, but he could if he understands and he's advised to do so and he puts the right people in place. What he really needs to start doing is listening to small business leaders. Because they are the backbone of this economy.
I mean, that's what the Tories have always been about,
exactly.
Small businesses.
Yes, and the problem with Rishi is that he is big business. That's his family legacy.
Jeremy Hunt?
Well, he's shown that he's very much along the same line in terms of being quite globalist sort of figure, and he's looking more at the supranational structures than at our national level. So if they really want to get back in touch with the people, I think they need to go out into the Red Wall, see the challenges facing them, and actually understand that people want growth to open up from the bottom up and not from the top down.
OK. Good to talk to you this morning. As always, thank you very much indeed. What do you think about that? I mean,
Seems a bit of a bleak outlook, doesn't it?
Well, it does.
But then he warned of that all through the leadership campaign, didn't
Yeah,
he?
he said it was all going to be very difficult. But I tell you what, and I know a lot of you aren't particular fans of Rishi Sunak watching and listening this morning, but doesn't it seem a little bit quieter at the moment?
It seems more settled. And certainly,
a bit more sensible.
Yeah, the polls are saying that, I mean, there's still an enormous gap between Labour and Conservatives, but the Conservatives are growing very slightly, about 3 points up, I think, which I suppose has to be good, given that Rishi Sunak isn't giving us any good news, really.
No.
It's all harsh, dire warnings.
But,
But do you get the sense that somebody's
what
now
do we
in
do
charge?
about it?
I don't know.
Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. At 6:08, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today. And the billionaire Elon Musk now owns Twitter and has immediately ousted its top 3 executives. He says he was acquiring the platform because he believed it was important to have a space where a wide range of beliefs can be debated in a healthy manner. The deal was valued at £38 billion.
A new analysis of nurses' pay shows that they work the equivalent of 1 day a week for free. Researchers from London Economics also found the salary of an experienced nurse has fallen by 20%.
The number of empty shops continues to fall, but concerns remain amid dropping consumer confidence. Empty shops made up nearly 10% of retail park outlets, while London, the South East and the East of England had the lowest vacancy rates.
The Royal Mint has started producing the first coins featuring a portrait of the King. The move, transitioning of course from the face of Queen Elizabeth II to her son now, represents the biggest change to UK coins since decimalisation. The 27 billion coins bearing the late Queen, currently in circulation, will of course always remain legal tender.
I'm looking forward to getting hold of one of those coins.
Yeah.
Just for that little piece of history.
I think it's in the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll start seeing them in our change.
Yeah, we will. December they come
December.
in. December.
Yeah.
So we'll have them by Christmas.
That'd be nice.
It'll be nice. Will be nice. Now to Northern Ireland, heading to the polls after politicians in Stormont failed to come together to elect a new speaker. But anger The protocol, the Northern Ireland Protocol, isn't just limited to the Assembly, it's also affecting businesses.
Well, our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie spoke to one of Ireland's top road haulage companies. They've been involved in high-level briefings with the government and the EU.
Elections with no governments is nothing new in Northern Ireland. The last one in 2017 saw Sinn Féin stay out for 1,044 days. This time, it's the DUP that are refusing to enter. They are protesting over the European Brexit agreement called the Protocol. None of the unionist parties support it because it puts a border down the Irish Sea and annexes the commercial side of Northern Ireland. It's not just politicians that oppose it. Those in road haulage, such as Peter Somerton, say that the paperwork is worthless, and if implemented in full, the supply chains into Northern Ireland will stop within 48 hours.
I'll start with the value of the paperwork. The value of the paperwork is zero. And it's zero because these are all goods that are in free circulation throughout the rest of the UK. The cost of it, using the government's own numbers for the Trader Support Service alone, was 340 million. That's for 2.3 million declarations, £150 for each movement between GB and Northern Ireland Extra. Add to that, if they're SPS goods, the cost of health certification, which is about £150, the costs just become astronomical. That's why the government knows and the EU knows they cannot deploy the Northern Ireland Protocol. If the protocol was to be deployed as it's written at any point in time from the 1st of April 21, when it should have been, according to the law, then the supply chain for frozen and fresh goods into Northern Ireland would have, and I'll agree with one of my industry colleagues from last week, would last no more than 48 hours.
The cost of living crisis is already stretching budgets, and with less goods coming into Northern Ireland, costs are rising.
It's not hard to model this out. In fact, we can see it every day, because whenever we're moving goods from Britain to the Republic of Ireland, we can see an extension of the time delay in those goods that used to move day 1, delivery day 3, to now day 1 for delivery day 8. Now that just doesn't work whenever you bring it to the additional complexity of a fully integrated supply chain like exists between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The government knows this, the Commission knows this. It's time that we're actually saying the emperor's no clothes, this doesn't work.
Belfast Port has always dealt with containers from right around the globe. But those from GB mainland are taken to one side, inspected by EU officials, and then told if they can enter the market and what tariffs must be put upon them.
There isn't anywhere else where third countries move the type of goods on the flows that move between Britain and Northern Ireland entering the EU. That just doesn't work like that. That's not how international trade works. It's a container load of beef with one cert, moving across a deep water port, getting checked on a period of days into Rotterdam, into Calais, and then getting released into free circulation at the very start of the food process. What we have here is at the end of the process, instead we have got tens and tens and tens of commodities all in the same truck, all moving across the Irish Sea together. One fault on any one of these issues, and I have some examples in front of me. For example, I have an example here where on the same health cert, one product was rejected. So everything that was on the trailer actually went back to Britain. I have an example where the wrong shape of a letter I resulted in product being sent back.
A new election will not bring new results. The same two parties will be back in whatever order, and the more liberal will be squeezed. And the problems with the protocol will still remain. Dougie Beattie, GB News.
Well, still to come for you this morning, we've got an exclusive interview with the former Home Secretary, Amber Rudd. Gloria De Piero spoke to her about the story surrounding her resignation over the Windrush scandal. Let's have a look.
I resigned over something which I think was a great sin, really, committed against a large number of people by the country, by the state. And the fact that it was difficult for me and my family is as nothing, really, compared to the terrible difficulties and wrongs that were committed to people of the Windrush generation, who are the people who were really badly treated by a whole series of Home Secretaries and Prime Ministers who quite simply were unable to regularise what should have been perfectly simple situation, which is people who arrived at a certain period of time, largely from Caribbean countries, should have been given their papers so they were accepted as British citizens. And over quite a long period, it emerged that they hadn't been, and they were treated appallingly.
Well, that interview is in full at 1:30 today on GB Newsday.
But we've got much more to come for you, including Prince Harry's memoir. It comes out now early next year. We'll talk to Kinsey Schofield to see what's being said about it all in the United States.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Loads of you getting in touch already this morning. David says, glad to have you back, Anne.
Thank you.
Hope you had a restful holiday in Malta.
I did. It was wonderful.
Big smile on my face when I saw you on the telly.
Oh, thank you. You were very popular in Malta. Everywhere I went, everybody was talking about you.
And my cat.
And his cat, yeah.
Timmy's a very popular
They say
boy.
you kept them going during the pandemic when all they could do was lock down, obviously. And watching you and Timmy.
Oh, there you go. It's a very popular boy.
He is.
Interestingly, on COP27, now that the PM says he's not going, John says it should be down to the pecking order. There are more important things that need his attention, like the cost of living crisis, which I think a lot of people would agree with.
Well, I think when you see what's on Rishi Sunak's plate at the moment, you have to agree, even if you are utterly green, you have to agree that, I mean, there are just such urgent things that need to be handled now, and they're going to be not just something that's going to be a decision in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be ongoing. There's going to be a backlash to absolutely every decision he makes, isn't there? Somebody's going to complain. As Gary says, disabled and the low paid, they're going to be hit the hardest, and they'll be paying for the cuts. They're always easy targets for governments. They wouldn't be targeting you so much as, you know, you could argue putting other people first, and it is down to pecking order. As John says, Rishi Sunak has to look at this long list of huge matters, and I can see that somewhere along the line he said no. Talking green at the moment isn't what people want to hear.
No.
Some people do, but...
The vast majority,
it's a big
no.
decision to
It's
take
like, just
again.
get on with what's happening here at the minute. Anyway, let us know what you think about that one. It is very nearly 6:20. Oh.
You're wishing time away.
9:20.
Wow.
We'll go home in 10 minutes. Now, we're turning to the news now of Prince Harry and that memoir. He's not pulled it, as we perhaps thought, but it has been delayed. It will hit the shelves on January the 10th.
It's got an absolutely knockout title. Knockout in that it's very raw and it's very loaded. It's called Spare. And obviously that is because he's always been talked about, the spare. In royal terms, you've always had the heir and the spare. Princess Margaret, you could argue, was the spare to the Queen, and Prince Andrew, the spare to Prince Charles. And Prince Harry, and Princess Diana used to joke about him being called the spare. She used to say, you're the spare. And obviously it was something they could joke about when she was around. But since her death, he's obviously felt that it's a diminished role, and he's clearly bitter about it. Anyway, the memoir is apparently going to discuss everything from her death to his time in Afghanistan.
Well, let's talk to Royal and Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield, who can tell us a little bit more. I mean, what reaction has there been over in the States, Kinsey, to the fact that now we know the release date and we know the title?
Well, first of all, welcome back, Anne. We missed you. But I do think that we are looking forward to it. I mean, have you ever seen such hype for a book? Maybe not in a positive way, but people are certainly, there is a morbid curiosity associated with the publication of this book. And, you know, I agree that the title comes off bitter, but you would hope that Harry would think about the fact that his great-grandfather was also the spare, and look at the incredible legacy, probably one of the most incredible spares that the monarchy ever saw, the incredible legacy that he led. There's also a lot of jokes happening about the fact that he's going to be reading the audiobook. So if you did not know whether or not Prince Harry was capable of reading, here comes the test, January 10th.
Yeah, it's interesting as well that they've delayed the publication, but according to all the reports today, Random House, is it the publishers?
Penguin Random House.
Penguin Random House have said they haven't toned it down. That reports that it's been toned down since the Queen's death, you know, those are overblown, and it's going to be raw, and it's going to hit some people very hard.
Yes, that they wanted to stress that it was just, he needed time to update the book in regards to the Queen's death. Perhaps he wants to honor her towards the end of it. But I do anticipate that it's going to be raw and it's going to be ugly. There are arguments being made that both his mother and his father participated in similar books. His mother secretly with Andrew Morton, his father discussed his relationship with his parents in a book. But I'd also say, if you're looking at Prince Harry's life, he does seem to be mimicking a lot of Diana's moves with the sit-down interview, the bombshell Oprah interview, this book. But you'd hope that he'd keep in mind that Diana had a tragic ending, so perhaps he should not follow in those footsteps.
He's blown it, hasn't he? Now with the rest of the family?
That's my personal opinion. If I'm, Catherine, if I'm William, I'm worried about what's going to be said. I can't trust him. William's already seen him and his wife be critical of his wife on television. Catherine, during the Oprah interview, talking about how Catherine made Meghan cry, totally irrelevant. We didn't need to revisit that. So I do think that he is going to blow it with his family, and I think that he's going to lose out on a lot of opportunities, and he's going to jeopardize the future for his children, Prince Harry.
They've released the front cover of the book, and it's very... I've got one here, a copy of it here in the Sun today, but they've actually released the official picture of the front cover. There it is. And it's very, I don't know, it's very stark, isn't it? It's very bare.
It's haunting, and I don't necessarily think it's very flattering. Another argument I had made over the last few hours having conversations about this book is that, yes, his mother and father talked to authors. They did participate in similar activities, but we expected more from Harry. We expected better from Harry. He had that charisma, he had that joy. Where has it gone? Because he completely lacks it right now. And that photo, to me, is a good example of him missing, the missing Harry that we all fell in love with.
I'll tell you what they've done on the very top. They've blurred the receding hairline. Have you noticed?
I didn't want to say it. Leave it to you, Stephen.
They have. You're right.
Yeah, they've blurred. So at the very top, let's bring the picture back up. So at the very top.
It's almost like a halo.
It's a bit like a halo, yeah. So they blurred the baldy. There you go.
They did.
Which is just I think artistically an interesting move. Look, can we talk about from Prince Harry to Elon Musk, who's finally forking out his $38 billion to buy Twitter, and then walking in on the first day and sacking the three top executives?
I mean, that is a show of power. And keep in mind, these are people that publicly challenged him. These are people that he fought with on Twitter before he actually completed this purchase. So he's going in there, and I don't know if you saw the list of demands from Twitter employees that they released a few days ago, because they don't want to come back and physically work in an office. So they made this list of demands. This is Elon saying, I am the boss. This is how things are going, or you're out of here. I very much respect the way that he's coming in and showing them who's boss. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Twitter, because he says, I don't want Twitter to be this place where you're only hearing, the left or the right. We need to have conversations, and we need to make, Twitter a place where we can grow and learn, and not just be this ecosystem of anger and vulgarity.
Gosh, it really shows, isn't it? It's not the politicians who are in charge anymore.
No.
Is it?
No.
People like Elon Musk. Absolutely astonishing.
Scares me a little bit.
I know. I think it should scare us all just a little bit.
Kinsey, thanks very much indeed. Catch up with you soon, no doubt. Love to know what you think about this whole Twitter thing and about the Prince Harry thing.
I mean, yes, exactly. I wonder about Twitter. My first reaction is, do you care? And then you think, here is a multi-billionaire who has bought one of the biggest disseminators of news, because a lot of people only get their news from Twitter, or they get their opinions from Twitter, or they thrive on Twitter themselves. And a lot of people put out a lot of hate on Twitter too. And he has not been voted in by anybody. He hasn't been elected, but he is now an incredibly powerful man when it comes to free speech. And that's something that's more important than anything, isn't it?
Well, we shall see. Your thoughts, please. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We're going to get the thoughts of Claire Pearsall and Emma Burnell in a couple of minutes as they take us through the papers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back. It's very nearly 6:30. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Let's have a look at the front pages for you today. And the Prime Minister's looking into expanding the windfall tax on energy companies, according to The Telegraph.
The Times leads with Rishi Sunak's ambitious deal with France to curb migrant crossings.
The Guardian has a warning from the UN saying there's no credible way to keep limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees.
And the Daily Express has launched a campaign to save the pensions triple lock.
The Mail has the news of the royal family dreading the release of Prince Harry's memoir, Spare.
And the Mirror leads with a photo of Ghislaine Maxwell enjoying a jog in the sun.
How much is enjoying it behind bars?
No, that's what I was going to say. Enjoying is a funny word to use.
The Sun details why Prince William won't be heading to Qatar next month to watch England play in the World Cup. Oh, and let's not do the Daily Star.
No.
Let's just, we'll get rid of that.
You don't want to know.
Disgusting.
You don't want to know.
It's disgusting. Take that out.
Yeah.
Hate it. Anyway, going through the papers this morning.
They can't think of anything else to say now that Liz Lettuce has gone.
Yeah, they should have stuck to Lettuce.
Yeah.
Should have done. Former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and political consultant Emma Burnell are here. Morning to you both.
Right.
Emma, let's start with the windfall tax. Should we in the Telegraph?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably quite a sensible measure to raise more money to fill the massive black hole that is in the finances. I think Shell announced something absolute record profits again. A lot of the energy companies really are seeing a Ukraine boom. They are not suffering the energy crisis the rest of us are. And that, therefore, it just makes sense in that kind of we're all in it together spirit that that kind of excess profit. It's not a windfall.
They haven't done anything wrong, is it?
They haven't done anything wrong, but they are making excess profit from a situation which most of us are finding very hard. And I think, frankly, if I were in charge of an energy company, and certainly if I was in charge of their PR department, I would be very much welcoming this and saying, yes, of course, we want to do our bit and pay our bit.
There's some financial arguments against windfall tax, aren't there, Claire?
There are, and I think as we've seen, we've had a windfall tax previously, and I've always said it's a really short-termist issue. So you have a windfall tax, you think, great, we move on, and then the profits go up again. So what do you keep doing? I think you need to look at how you tax them going forward. You can't just keep saying, right, we'll have a windfall tax, because it's one of those really messy things, and you start imposing it and these energy companies will just take their technology and go, we're not going to play anymore, and the UK will fail. So I think you need to look at how you tax them. You need to look at the profit levels, and you need to come up with a new way of doing it, different levies put upon them. And I think, in all fairness to Shell, they actually offered the government an option and said, we will pay you more money. Tell us how you want to do it. Tell us how this can act. And the government didn't go back to them. So, I think there's a little bit of fault on both sides. But just a windfall tax isn't going to work. You need to look at it much, much more long term. And especially given the kind of energy crisis that we're in, we need to do this quickly. And I don't know why everyone's dragging their feet over it.
Well, it doesn't sound as though they are now. They may be looking at it much more quickly.
And I hope so. And I hope this is the new government coming in and actually going to make a difference and make some decisions that they stick with. Because that's, what we need in this country right now is those decisions to be made quickly.
The Labour Party will be thrilled over this, but they'll say, well, this was our idea.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think Claire's right in many ways. A windfall tax is a short-term solution. We are in a short-term crisis. But what worries me slightly is that there is this sense that they're going to bring in renewables into this measure. And frankly, what we should be doing is investing far more into renewables and nuclear, the long-term measures, and actually making those much more tax-friendly against the fossil fuels, which we should be increasing taxes on as we go, so that we can do that transition into both energy security, but also energy that will help us with our climate change targets.
How much are they reckoning a windfall tax, that the sort of which they're considering now, might be able to raise?
I mean, you're looking into tens of millions it would raise, but it's only sort of a one-off, and you need to understand going forward, and Emma's right, that renewables shouldn't be in that, because you need to encourage those companies to put those renewables out there. You need to make it a much more incentivised market for people to get involved with, because at the moment it's very, very expensive. So whilst tens of millions sounds a really attractive number, it doesn't actually go very far when you're looking at the rest of the country. And again, if you're looking forward to energy security, it doesn't get you very far. And unfortunately, we've become so used to these large numbers that we get a little bit blasé about how much it buys you, how far it can go and how long it can last for.
I thought Labour was talking about it raising billions under their plan.
I mean, I think it will raise a certain amount of billions, not as many billions as are in the gap, but it will raise, I think, somewhere between 5 and 10 billion.
See, that would help
I mean,
a
it will
lot,
depend
wouldn't it?
entirely how it's designed, of course.
Yeah.
But I think that that is a lot, but Claire's right that it's a one-off a lot, and there also needs to be much bigger plans on just completely changing our energy infrastructure and our energy systems and closing our energy loop to make sure that we don't get into a situation where we're reliant on either oligarchs from the Middle East in terms of oil or from Russia in terms of gas. We need to be much more self-sufficient in terms of energy.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the Times, Claire, should we? In the Channel crossings, Rishi Sunak seems determined to... But he reckons talking to France will actually solve a lot of these problems.
Can that help, where nobody else has been able to do that?
Talking to France is one thing. Having relationship with your closest neighbour is a good thing. I think that's to be said. What is lacking in the detail, and especially when you read this piece in the Times, is what the conversations actually entail and what it includes. Because at the moment they want it to include a minimum number of French officers patrolling the beaches at any one time. Well, what does that actually mean? The coastline is enormous. I mean, this is kilometres of coastline. It's very, very difficult to police. So how many police... it seems a little bit vague at the moment. Yes, you have to have those relations, but what's more important is actually clearing the backlog in the asylum cases, which is another area that he needs to concentrate on. We aren't dealing with them. In the past 12 months, 75% of the completed asylum cases have been granted. But you've got an enormous backlog, and the average case takes 480 days.
I mean, that's
to decide.
ridiculous, isn't it? How can it take 480 days to decide someone's credibility for asylum?
Because they're not getting to that decision point. They're being kept very, very expensively in sometimes in terrible conditions. We're both spending a lot of money badly and not spending enough money, which is a weird paradox, but very true. If you look at that Times piece, what's really interesting is that the government is saying, well, we praise how well France has done in terms of turning their own backlog around. Then you look further down the piece and it tells you that France has trebled its spending on asylum. And this is where I think we're trying to do two things at once. We're trying to say that we're going to be really tough on asylum, but we're trying to do it on the cheap.
Yeah.
And actually, those two things can't
And it's plainly not working.
No, it's not working either. And it's not working for people who are upset and worried about too much immigration. It's not working for Liberals who really want to see that we have a system that works for the immigrants as well. So I don't think it's pleasing either of the audiences
It isn't, and it's very, very difficult with these asylum cases to get the identities of individuals. They often turn up with no paperwork for whatever reason. And if you don't have any returns agreements as well, so once you've got the identity thing out of the way, we've lost access to all of the returns systems that we had prior to Brexit. It's not a fault of Brexit, it is just one of those things. And the previous Home Secretary should have been working on that. We had the Dublin's return scheme in its existence previously, where you could see if somebody else had claimed asylum, and quite often you would just return them to those countries. So the turnaround was an awful lot quicker. We lost that. So you have to now make those decisions with 27 separate member states, but those haven't been put into place.
Now,
so there's a lot of things that
knowing that
doing.
we've got this problem and that Rishi Sunak is saying he's going to do something about it, he appointed Suella Braverman into the Home Office.
Indeed.
What do we think of that?
I mean...
Is she the woman to do it?
No, she's not a competent politician. If anyone who's so incompetent that they both are breaking the codes by sending things through their personal emails to people who shouldn't receive them, and then sending them to the wrong person so that it comes out that they've done all of this. That's not a person I trust with a system that's really important, that needs detailed, rigid scrutiny and understanding, and needs someone with real responsibility to fight the corner.
So on that basis, you're glad Donald Trump won in 2016 rather than Hillary Clinton then? Because that's what she would...
I think the idea that Donald Trump isn't taking personal documents out is slightly out of touch now,
well, yeah.
given what's been found in Mar-a-Lago.
But
yes, Hillary Clinton absolutely shouldn't have done that. But it's I mean, frankly, do I care about that 5 years on? Not so much as I care about what we're talking about now, which is Suella Braverman's inability to deal with this crisis. But they should have put someone in the Home Office who could actually take charge and get grip.
I don't disagree with that at all. I was quite surprised at the appointment, considering that she had resigned 6 days prior to that. I don't think she's the right person for the Home Office. It's a really, really difficult place to be. Interestingly, she put out the new Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, yesterday to answer the urgent question. He's proved to be incredibly competent. I must admit, I was quite impressed listening to him, and you sort of think, have you made the right decision? Perhaps that's Home Secretary material. I suspect that Suella Braverman will not last in this position. If your premiership is being overtaken by the appointment of your Home Secretary, which has proved to be a bit of an issue, to put it mildly, then I don't think she'll last. It may well be his first, I'm taking power, look, I'll make this decision. You could look at it in a political term, that he's being decisive.
Isn't it?
Absolutely is. And he is very clever at that. So I wonder if this is how good is Rishi Sunak. He has just got rid of the Home Secretary after deciding that, no, she wasn't suitable. So it may be all power to his elbow in that respect.
Well, maybe leave it till after Christmas.
I was going to say,
how it won't be immediate.
Shuffle?
It won't be immediate. But I think it's a real shame for the Home Office, who deserve much better.
What's next? Shall we talk about...
Prince William, I think, not going to Qatar is interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Prince William has...
Even if we get to the final.
Even if we get to the final, he said... And I think they haven't made it explicit that it's about the human rights issues and issues around the fact that gay and lesbian relationships are illegal in Qatar. But I think it's very much loudly unsaid by
They said
William
his diary is too busy.
His diary is too busy, but I think actually if you look at how much he's been really prominent at international football matches, it's quite clear that he would have cleared his diary if he felt it was important. And I think there is a statement being made here, and quite rightly too. My family have, we always do a sweepstake on every big international sort of sporting event. We have every time half the money goes to a charity. So this time we're doing it to a human rights charity. That's
excellent.
And I think hopefully lots of people are trying to make that kind of... We don't want to lose our ability to engage with international football, but we also want to make sure that we're taking a stance, because it really is just quite awful that people are having to be put into this situation.
I think it's really good that we can shine a light onto the human rights abuses in that country. I don't agree with holding the World Cup there, but if it does highlight the issues that are going on in that country, then I think that's a good thing. People don't always know. You take it for granted that people understand what these countries stand for and what they believe to be right or wrong, but they don't always. So I think by putting that in the spotlight and making it more apparent, it might help in the future for those people who live in that country, who are being held essentially by a regime. It might just make things better. That's the only hope that you can have, is that something will improve for those people, because it is appalling what goes on there. I won't actually be watching it. Normally I don't boycott things, I'm not one of those people, but I won't be watching these. I just think this is the wrong idea, and especially for football.
But as you said, at least we're talking about it,
yeah,
interestingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that's the one good thing that comes from it, then that's great. We can only hope.
Can we talk about UK food snobs?
Yes.
Claire, this is in the eye this morning. I was sat in a coffee shop yesterday in Toaster, and the lady I sat next to, I could hear say, in a coffee shop saying, "Oh, I'm a real coffee snob, you know. I'll only drink Nescafe."
Good luck.
And I was like,
Good for you.
That's a coffee snob, is it?
Oh dear.
anyway, what's a food
Yeah, so
snob?
what is a food snob?
It's quite interesting. It's about people understanding where their food comes from and not having things that are shipped in out of season, which is bad for the environment and also bad for your wallet. I think we've all been to an artisan baker's, for example, and you...
Have we?
I know that I haven't regretted every second of it because my wallet was emptied rather quickly. You go to craft fairs, you go to village hall fairs, and there's always some sort of artisan stand. But it's all of the global warming. We are so used to being able to access strawberries in December anytime we want that we don't think about where it comes from. So I think it's a bit of a let's go back to seasonality, stop throwing so much food away. You have this and then you throw it. So we just need to be a little bit more sustainable in how we eat. Seasonality is really, really important. And I think we've done that before. But people are very, very snobby about where things come from. Your lady in toaster, maybe not so much on the coffee front.
Yeah.
I like my coffee, I must admit, but I buy it from a local supplier because I like the blends that they have.
I prefer Nescafe, but there you go.
Yeah, and it's each to their own in that respect, but I think that we need to...
But I don't know whether I could live without avocados.
I totally live without avocados.
Avocados are great.
No. This is our controversy of the morning. I'm not having them.
This is it, the avocado line.
Smashed avocado on toast, the best breakfast ever.
I mean, what's wrong with you people?
I don't know, but I can't.
I'm Team Stephen on this one, I'm sorry.
You probably eat something imported from goodness knows where. What's your favourite?
I don't know.
You're going to say
bananas.
Bananas. Okay, there you're bananas.
Well, yeah, they're imported.
Marmite on toast for breakfast, that would do me.
Oh, yes.
What on toast, sorry?
Marmite.
Oh.
No, I'm with you on the Marmite, but I would prefer the avocado, to be
I just bought a big tub of Marmite the other day.
Yeah.
It's expensive, isn't it? I've forgotten how it lasts for ages.
Yeah, that's the thing. Unless you're my dad who spoons it on, then you're going to last. That jar will last you.
Yeah. It's like nearly £5.
Oh, date fish fingers.
It must take you a long time to get through that.
Yeah.
Marmite.
I bought fish fingers yesterday for the first time in a very long time because my son is home for half term.
Fish fingers are wonderful.
But they're so expensive.
Are they? They used to be a cheap alternative.
10 fish fingers, £4.
Wow.
I haven't bought them for such a long time.
And maybe, coming back to the story,
expensive.
that's what we need to think about. Maybe, in fact, actually having seasonality will help us reduce prices. So it's about sort of...
I know.
Positive.
Absolutely. Maybe we just need to learn.
But actually, white fish has become expensive.
It has become really expensive, and it's a real shame because it's absolutely really tasty. But I was really quite shocked. But I think also there's an advert here just for pumpkins, and this is one of the things every year that then go to waste.
Yeah.
People don't
but
use
at least
the
they are
flesh and
grown
such.
locally, and you're supporting
They
the local
are,
farmer.
yes, the pick your owns and stuff like that, which is really, really good. But people need to learn how to use the inside of it.
Pumpkin on toast wouldn't be the
But lovely soup.
Really wouldn't.
Lovely soup.
Does it make a good soup?
Oh, pumpkin soup is delicious.
Someone said if you roast pumpkin seeds, they're very nice.
They are. They're lovely.
So I might do that.
But why go to the bother, I say? I'd love to hear what's your guilty food pleasure? Something you know is probably too expensive or too imported, probably costs a fortune to ship across the planet, but you absolutely love. Your guilty food pleasure. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Make us envious.
My guilty food pleasure is not shipped across the planet.
What is it?
It's pot noodle. Beef and tomato pot noodle.
No.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
No.
So I'm permanently on a diet.
Dinner out, aren't
I'm
you?
a cheap day.
When I'm off the diet, lamb. Oh,
lamb.
I love lamb, but honestly, good lamb is fatty lamb, so I can't have it very often because I've got a lot more weight to lose, but I do love a bit of lamb.
No, cheese. Cheese is always my guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Really nice cheese, but yeah, again, it's not good for the waistline, but it is gorgeous.
Yeah, and it can be very local, which is very good.
Yes, some really nice cheeses coming out.
Guilty food pleasures, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thank you both. Catch up with you two a little bit later on. Now, NASA space probes have witnessed a big impact crater being formed on Mars, the largest in the solar system ever caught in the act, as it were.
Apparently, it's a van-sized meteor dug out a huge hole on the surface of Mars, with the impact causing debris to be hurled up to 19 miles away. And that would make the blast zone almost as big as London?
Well, that's someone who knows a lot more about this. Space and planetary scientist Andy Lown. Good morning to you. We love talking to you, Andy. Tell us more about this. What's going on?
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Anne. Yeah, it's great. It was a good news report yesterday and a briefing from NASA. On Christmas Eve last year, the InSight lander, which is on the surface of Mars, has a seismic detector. And the idea was to look for Mars quakes. And it did detect an unusual vibration, and it was actually an impact on the surface of the planet. And the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter spacecraft was then flying and mapping the surface, actually found the zone of the impact, and they were able to tie the two together. So you could actually see where this impact had taken place, blasting out a crater about 150 meters across, really quite impressive. But as you rightly said, it distributed the material for quite some distance away, and that was quite dramatic. Because it was had the seismic detectors there, it could actually study the waves from the impact as they moved through the planet. And they were able, therefore, to take measurements of what the crust was like on Mars itself, to see what type of material is there, because Mars is a complicated world, and a world that we're trying to understand. And because of that, the data it was able to provide back was absolutely fantastic. But it also excavated material, and what was surprising was the material it excavated was actually ice blocks. We have a globe of Mars for you to look at. We've got to have a prop, haven't we, really? So this is where go that way. This is where the probe actually is, here. And the impact, of course, is quite some distance away over here. But the impact is fairly close to the equator. And what was surprising is that ice was excavated from an area near the equator, and that wasn't expected at all. We weren't expecting to find ice. And a brilliant picture there, so you can see those white areas there. That's ice blocks which have been blasted from underneath the surface. Near the equator is a surprise, because we expect the ice to be underground at the polar regions. But with it being now discovered at the equatorial region, where the temperatures are better, summertime you can get temperatures up to 22 degrees centigrade. Normally in the polar regions it can be minus 80, minus 140 degrees. So that is quite a surprise. And if you're going to put humans on the surface of the planet, get them towards the equator where the temperatures are better. But now you have access to water ice. So you can get access, 1, to water, 2, split the water up into hydrogen and oxygen, hydrogen for fuel, oxygen to breathe, or bring the two back together again for hydrogen fuel cells and generate electricity. So this is a breathtaking discovery, really, what this mission has actually done for us.
Are they going to start sending some of the probes we've got on the planet? Oh, I mean, I don't know how long it would take to get there, but are we going to try and send stuff to that area?
We actually, yes. I mean, that would be ideal, is to go back to that area now and have a close look at that. The data we can get actually from the orbiter is very good. It can study that, but it might be an opportunity. But the next series of probes are already scheduled for the areas they want to go to, including going to the surface and, in fact, bringing rock samples back. The pictures you're seeing here is showing you that great impact crater. This is a brilliant shot. There's the white there. That's the ice that's being excavated. The ice isn't going to stay very long, of course, because it's going to sublimate. That means it changes from a solid to a gas without going through a liquid phase, because the atmospheric pressure is too low. So the ice isn't going to stay on the surface long, but the fact there's ice underneath there is quite fantastic. And again, this is highlighting a region, as you rightly said, for us to go back to. Perhaps this is more of a better region to go with humans, which is quite fantastic. But we've got rock samples to bring back first, which is a mission which is going to go ahead in a few years' time, and the current rover on the surface of the planet is actually gathering all those samples together, ready to bring them back.
How many impacts have there been since we've actually landed anything on Mars? And does that show how much we are protected by our atmosphere? It could be happening to Earth otherwise.
Fabulous question. Yes, I mean, a number of impacts have been done. They're usually quite small. In fact, they were quite surprised, actually, that there hadn't been more, because Mars is closer to the asteroid belt than we are, and it was thought there'd be a lot more flotsam and jetsam hitting it. So they've actually detected, a couple of dozen small impacts, but these have been very small. But this was a big one. I mean, this was the surprise that a big one like this kind of object, this size, does actually enter the Earth's atmosphere of this size about once every year, every 18 months or so. But our atmosphere being more denser than on Mars, they burn up in the atmosphere, and perhaps a little bit actually hits the ground, if at all. And our atmosphere is the great protection for us. Mars's atmosphere, of course, is a lot thinner than ours, a lot thinner indeed, and therefore objects can really penetrate and hit the surface, which again is another risk for living on the surface of Mars. One, you've got the radiation which comes through onto the surface, and that's not protected. There's no ozone layer to protect you from radiation on the surface of Mars. So the radiation hits the surface directly. Earth's atmosphere, of course, protects us from that. We have an ozone layer, and that protects us from the radiation from space. Plus, we have a strong magnetic field. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field. If there's anything left there at all, it's weak, but there's the remnants of an old one. And again, this is why these impacts are important, because the shock waves pass through the planet itself, and we can detect what sort of a core Mars has got. And again, one of the great discoveries which has just come through is that Mars's core is actually much bigger than we thought.
Oh, let's just have a listen to this. Hold on. So we're almost out of time, Andy, but that's the shockwave itself, is it?
That's the noise of the impact of the object coming through the atmosphere, and the sound is very different because the Martian atmosphere is thinner than ours, and therefore lower pitches arrive at a different time to the higher pitches. So the sound you hear is very different, and it sounds more like a pop and a poop rather than the sound that you would get here on the Earth of an explosion.
Do you know what, Andy? Brilliant to talk to you.
Wow.
Thank you so much indeed. Chat to you again very soon, I hope.
That's like another planet talking to us, trying to tell us about itself.
It's lovely, isn't it?
That's
absolutely
incredible,
brilliant.
Isn't it?
He's great. I love talking to Andy.
Wow. And we don't know how much water ice there may be.
Oh,
is there
loads.
any prospect of releasing oxygen into the atmosphere and creating an atmosphere again?
Oh, now, what does that remind you of? There's a movie there somewhere.
There is.
Look, we've got much more to come. We'll bring you up to date on those impending tax hikes. On top of everything else, after the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain moving north today, grey skies accompanying the wet weather, but brightening up later from the south, and it will be warm once again for many. That warmth arriving across British shores from the south-southwest, but what's also arriving with the warmth is wet weather. That wet weather now already into western parts of the country, courtesy of an active cold front. So a wet start for much of the west, but especially western Scotland, Northern Ireland. A few hours of particularly heavy rain here could cause some trouble on the roads, I think. Nevertheless, the rain across England, Wales, Northern Ireland clears up by the afternoon. Brighter skies follow here. It pushes into central and northern Scotland, and it stays breezy across the UK. But that breeze, coming from the warm direction of the southwest, brings temperatures into the high teens, perhaps even low 20s. So it's a warm but fairly changeable day once again, and northern Scotland keeps the rain into the evening, but elsewhere drying up for a time with some clear spells before further spells of rain move up from the south. That rain heavy and persistent in the southwest as well as for Wales. More showery, I think, for the southeast and staying dry to the north, with some clear spells giving temperatures into the single figures for Scotland, northern England, as well as Northern Ireland, but generally staying mild elsewhere. And it's a dull and wet start to the day for England, Wales, Northern Ireland on Saturday. Those outbreaks of rain do move north fairly quickly. I think they'll linger for a time across Wales and the southwest, but brighter skies ahead of the rain and some sunshine appearing to the southeast will mean that temperatures again will be rising to well above average for the time of year. Could even see 22 Celsius in the southeast, for example. Sunday, a bright and breezy day, further heavy showers in places, particularly towards the northwest. Monday sees more wind and rain, but throughout the outlook, it does stay very mild.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online. We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
The Prime Minister considers higher taxes and more public spending cuts as he tries to balance Britain's financial deficit.
Good morning, 1 minute past 7 on Friday the 28th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Wherever you are, you can take us with you. Here are your top stories this morning.
Rishi Sunak looking at raising taxes as a budget delay apparently saves the Treasury £15 billion. The Prime Minister also wants to implement sweeping spending cuts following some improvement in the economic picture.
And the world's richest man, Elon Musk, has completed his takeover of the social media site Twitter. That brings to an end one of the most high-profile buyout sagas in recent history.
Northern Ireland's facing a snap election after deadline talks failed to elect a new speaker and break political deadlock.
And we've got the latest results from our exclusive GB News People's Poll. We asked if you think Rishi Sunak is actually the right man for the number 10 job. Find out how you voted.
It's a bit late now.
Well, he is in.
He's in.
He is in. But is he the right one to do it? I don't know. Wasn't
Look,
much of a choice, was there, really?
you can let us know what you think. You can join in our conversations this morning. Loads of you emailing in. We'll get through those in a couple of minutes. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, Rishi Sunak's climate pledge has come under scrutiny because he's decided to snub COP27 amid speculation that he could extend the windfall tax on energy companies.
Well, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor reportedly drawing up plans in the autumn budget around public spending cuts and tax increases worth up to £50 billion. They're trying to fill that big gaping hole in the public finances.
And this all comes, of course, as climate activists and a lot of MPs have been urging the new Prime Minister to go further on his windfall tax because of the oil and gas giants' profits growing, mushrooming.
Well, let's talk to the founder of Conservatives for Women, Caroline Fisk, who's here in the studio. Good to see you this morning. What do you make of all of this? I mean, he's clearly prioritising. Is he prioritising in the right way?
You mean with respect to not going to COP?
Well, not going to COP, focusing on balancing the budget.
Yeah, listen, it's absolutely essential that he focuses on balancing the budget. We saw what happened to Liz Truss and he saw what happened to Liz Truss, and we saw how...
Well, he predicted what would happen.
We saw how the markets reacted when we had this huge, promised increase in spending with the energy price thing plus the tax cuts. It's not sustainable for us just to keep on spending beyond our means.
But what he's doing is he's pandering to the markets rather than pandering to the needs of the people, isn't he?
I completely disagree with that. Somebody said, it shows that the markets are in charge of the UK. They're absolutely not. The Prime Minister and the government are in charge, and the markets reacted. And they were right to react to a huge, gaping hole in our budget. So, he needs to take that signal, and all of us need to, say we need to start sort of spending more responsibly.
And being taxed on our spending as well, which I suppose is useful for him. But ordinary working people, as they say in Parliament nowadays, they call everybody working people, don't they? Ordinary working people want to know how to pay their bills, and they see oil companies like Shell making massive, massive profits. So is he right to consider extending the windfall tax, which would at least make sense to a lot of people?
I understand that it seems like an easy win. I think that governments need to be very, very cautious about retrospective tax grabs. If it was me, I would be looking forward, and also rather than raising taxes, I would be looking at government spending. I think there is huge capacity still to cut the size of the state. We all know that there is wasteful spending within government. It can be difficult, but we need to look at it.
So, in what areas, though, specifically, do you think there is the most fat to trim? Because this is what causes a lot of concern for people.
OK, so I think the government does need to protect benefits. Universal credit, compared to the rest of Europe, is very tight. So if it was me, I'd be going out pretty quickly and saying, I'm protecting benefits. I'm also not sure about doing anything with the triple lock at the moment. Again, the pension is not huge, but there are other areas, and one area I think you should be looking at is all the quangos. Actually, I printed out this old report from 2010.
2010?
The coalition government was going to... Do you remember the phrase, the bonfire of the quangos?
Yes. What happened to that?
Exactly. Now,
went out.
So our spend on pensions is 115 billion per annum. Our spending on quangos is 220.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's way more.
How many of those do you think are worth the money?
Well, it's interesting here. 10 years ago, the Conservatives promised to get rid of 200 quangos. Now, I'm not saying they were just going to be scrapped, but they were going to be brought back in-house, merged. Because they're sort of arm's length, they don't get proper democratic scrutiny, but they don't get market scrutiny either. So I think we all know that...
But they do get a lot of taxpayers' money.
Exactly. And over the last 10 years, rather than any decrease, they've actually sort of crept up and grown bigger. And there are quangos, which I would say nobody outside of them has sort of heard of.
Oh, I don't think any of us have heard of any. Us ordinary folk haven't heard of any of them.
And
we don't really know what they are.
There are quangos which
something
most people have never heard of. I know this sort of sounds like, well, come on, here's this big opportunity over here, and there we all go, and none of us have to do anything else. But it is an opportunity, and I think the government needs to look at it seriously. And the other thing is state land banking.
Sorry?
The Ministry of Defence...
State land banking.
Well, OK, so the NHS, the railways, the Ministry of Defence all own huge acreages. And again, I know Oliver Letwin tried to look at this and he just gave up. These government departments...
So they own massive swathes of land...
Which they're not using.
With which they do nothing.
Well, there's some that, of course, most of it they're using, but all of these departments will have, old grounds around hospitals, grounds around railways, old defence training areas, which they're not using. And finally, the government needs to look at this seriously and focus there.
But there's an issue, isn't there, with land in the sense that if you get rid of it and then find, obviously Ben Wallace wants more defence spending. If you suddenly find it'd be much more expensive to buy back.
I promise you, we don't need all... If you think about the way it's built up over the last century, there's land which the Ministry of Defence will never need again, the railways won't need. Of course, we have to be sensible, so, we look at each bit carefully, but the government does need to look at some of the difficult stuff which hasn't been tackled, rather than go for, benefits, pensions. which people desperately rely upon.
There's a lot on Rishi Sunak's in tray, isn't there?
Yeah.
The more you talk about it, the more you realise that he's probably looked at COP27, and thought that really isn't top of my list of priorities. Do you think that's sensible?
I think that's absolutely sensible.
Even if he feels that we should be looking forward and going green, maybe now is not the time.
You know what, I tend to think people forget that the British people are sensible. We all know that COP27 can go ahead without him, and that if his representative goes, and it's right and proper that he's here, looking at the situation here, with really urgent problems to solve. So I think that's a great move of his.
As you mentioned urgent problems, we saw a picture of Suella Braverman, ironically enough. Do you think she can last as Home Secretary? I mean, she's causing more issues being in post than not, isn't she?
I think this is a real test for the Conservative government. You've got all the pressure from Labour and the Lib Dems, absolutely right and proper. They are the opposition. But you've got this huge pressure from the media, and particularly social media. So yesterday on Twitter, Suella Braverman out was trending. Now, I really hope that the government can look beyond the sort of bubble and the Twitter sphere, look out at the country. And Suella Braverman has got huge respect, particularly some of the things she's done around the rights of women. So I absolutely hope that they ride out the storm. Obviously, she needs to be told that was a serious breach. Do not do it again. And she won't. I have faith in her. And we need to look at what she has done and what she has achieved. And as I say, she's got huge respect for some of the issues she spoke out on where other people haven't bothered.
It is very difficult, isn't it, for people when you don't know a politician very well because they haven't been around for very long or they haven't been in the forefront for very long, to make up your mind about them through the headlines and through the Twitter sphere.
I agree, so I think we live in an age where people do need to look deeper. There is so much going on, and there's this real political battle going on now, isn't there, in the airwaves, this sort of culture wars. So I think it's everybody's responsibility to look deeper.
But why wasn't she there? Why did she send Robert Jenrick to the Commons instead of facing the Commons herself yesterday?
I personally don't know. But see, again, I think we need to move beyond those sort of, she did this, she did that, to actually look at substantive policy detail. And so, for example, across the country, people are concerned about the police and the unsolved crime, unsolved burglaries. And they spend their time sort of reprimanding women for misgendering rapists on Twitter. And Suella Braverman has said to them, stop this, refocus. Now, she didn't need to come out and do that, but she's paid attention to issues that women and voters really care about. And that's what I would like us to focus on.
Okay. But if you adopt that policy of give a politician a chance to make their mark and then decide, we'd probably still have Liz Truss as Prime Minister, wouldn't we? We didn't give her much of a chance, frankly, did we?
OK, I personally think the mistakes...
were too big?
Were too big. When you hear that the rest of the Cabinet wasn't consulted on some of the tax cuts, I think it was pretty serious what went on over that month. And so I think it's good that the Conservatives acted very quickly, but I think everybody's saying now we need stability, we need to give Rishi Sunak a chance, and his Cabinet. And, he's done everything right so far, hasn't he? He's been cautious and he's been very serious. Again, I'm very pleased with some of the stuff he's already announcing about women's rights and children's safeguarding, things that have just been left on the table. And he's coming out being really serious and saying that he'll deal with them. So I think, they're getting a lot of respect already from places that you might not have expected.
OK. Caroline, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Are they doing it? Suella Braverman, do we need to leave her be? Let her get on with it? Very interested to know what you think about that.
We had this discussion a while ago, didn't we, that I didn't like Priti Patel, but I didn't know why I didn't like her, because I've never met her. And I only really knew of her what I'd read in the headlines. But you've met her and you were terribly impressed.
And she was, she is a lovely person. She always comes across as very harsh. She's a really lovely person. Now, but again, whether you agree with what she was doing.
But if you argue, give people a chance. When do you make up your mind about them? I guess.
Yeah. Well, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let's bring you up to date with some of the other headlines at 7:13. And the billionaire Elon Musk is now in charge of Twitter and has ousted its top 3 executives. He says he was acquiring the platform because he thought it was important to have a space where a wide range of benefits can be debated in a healthy manner. He's paid, we think, £38 billion.
A new analysis of nurses' pay shows that they work the equivalent of 1 day a week for free. Researchers from London Economics also found the salary of an experienced nurse has fallen by 20%.
New research shows the abuse of customer service staff has hit record levels amid frustrations over cost of living, apparently. Almost half of frontline service staff have experienced hostility from customers in the last 6 months. More than half experienced verbal abuse, including swearing and shouting, and more than a quarter experienced physical abuse.
Railway staff in Scotland will stage a 24-hour walkout on Saturday tomorrow amid ongoing disputes over pay and conditions. ScotRail says the latest offer would have seen the lowest paid staff receive a basic pay increase of almost 7.5%. But RMT's Scottish organiser says the latest increase falls short of where they need to be, with inflation sitting at 12.2%.
A brass-engraved die has been created to emboss the King's cipher on the red dispatch boxes. The die is first made on a machine which runs overnight to create the cipher's intricate details. It's then hand-finished and hand-polished before it's used to apply the gold leaf emboss of Charles's cipher. And that cipher's going to be everywhere.
Is that dye the mould?
The mould?
Yes.
Sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, a bit like a seal or something.
Yeah, like a seal.
It sort of prints the gold onto it. I see. Gosh, fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. David's been in touch. Says, "Morning, Stephen. What is the badge next to your remembrance poppy on your lapel?" Well, that actually, see, I was only talking about this last night when I put it on, because obviously that's got the Queen's cipher on. It's a regimental thing.
Oh, it's lovely.
But of course, even I was looking actually at the poppy shop last night, and they haven't updated it to Charles's cipher yet. All these things are going to take time.
Yes, they will take time. And I do apologise if you think I should be wearing a poppy. I was only reminded of it's poppy time.
It's poppy. Well, today is the first day.
Yeah.
Last Friday of October.
Very important, absolutely.
I know, but you'll get yours on tomorrow.
Morning, Helen. Helen says, I'm enjoying watching GB News breakfast from Melbourne in Australia. Although it's late afternoon here and I'm enjoying a glass of wine. I remember watching Anne on the television during the 1980s when I lived in London.
Interesting on Harry's book, Sarah says Waterstones are offering spare pre-order at half price. But they do that.
They all are. It's pre-orders. You don't get your book until January the 10th. You pre-order, so they've got your money up front, which is why they can afford to sell it half price already.
Because it's 28 quid full price.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Quite a lot.
So there you go.
A lot of very robust opinions as to the picture that's on the front of his book.
Yes,
it's a very stark picture just there, as you can see. I'm showing you from the sun, just of Prince Harry's face. Looking, some people say he looks spiteful in it. I think that's a bit harsh.
That's Carolyn Taunton says, I looked at the photo of Harry. I could see spite in his eyes. He should call his book Spite. I won't be buying it, but I won't be buying it either. But I don't think he looks spiteful.
We'll all be talking about it, and it will be a worldwide bestseller, just as well, because he's going to be paid 36.8 million, either pounds or... Actually, I think it's pounds. 36.8 million pounds.
Is that what he's getting?
Yeah. Not just for the one book, but it's a 3-title deal, apparently.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so there's more to come. I mean, goodness only knows what he's going to be saying in it. And at what point he runs out of nasty things to say, I suppose.
He's got a ghostwriter, of course.
It's a ghostwriter, but it's written in the first person.
Right.
And apparently that is the first time ever a book has been written in the first person by a member of the royal family.
Don't like it.
Which makes it it'll be a worldwide bestseller, there's no doubt about it.
Oh, it will.
Will you believe everything in it, I suppose? That's the thing. Maybe it should have that they're campaigning, aren't they, to put in before every episode of The Crown, this is a work of fiction. Maybe they should put that on Harry's book as well.
Well, it should be.
Not that I've got an opinion, you understand?
It's his truth, I presume.
I hate that phrase.
Do you? His
the
truth.
truth is the truth, isn't it?
No.
I don't see how you can have his truth or her
Because we
truth.
all have different perspectives, don't we?
Well, as the Queen said at the time, she said, recollections may vary. I understand that, but the truth is still the truth.
What actually happened? Well, yes, I guess, but it's how
His truth that's like hiding behind saying, this is my version of the truth. That's different, but not saying it's my truth.
I don't know. It's a bit like
truth.
What's the face who was Trump's spokesperson talking
Oh,
about
yes.
alternative facts and all that sort of thing. Yeah, well, that was
You can't
interesting.
have it. The truth is the truth, surely.
Oh, let's know what you think. Now, as we all continue to grapple with economic recession, well, are we in recession yet?
A lot of people think we are, but I think we can talk ourselves into it if we're not careful.
Yeah, but anyway, the economic downturn, certainly. Property markets are, of course, starting to feel the squeeze as well.
Yeah, and this comes as the online real estate agency Purple Bricks reported a loss of over £10 million last year alone, with the business now facing redundancies.
Well, let's talk to property expert Russell Quirk. Morning to you, Russell. Look, on Purple Bricks to start with, I mean, is this one estate agency which is doomed now? Is it finished?
It's certainly beleaguered, Stephen, and it's been under pressure for the last kind of 2 or 3 years, really. Obviously, it runs a very different model to traditional estate agents. So it takes a smaller upfront fee, regardless of the outcome of the sale. So in other words, they take the money even if the property doesn't sell. And I think that's kind of come home to roost now, really, where people believe, particularly in a tougher market, that actually maybe they don't want to speculate £1,200 on the basis that they may or may not sell their home. So I think Purple Bricks are a bit of a one-off. In my opinion, they have a pretty inexperienced management team now. That I think is one of the main contributors to their kind of fall in fortunes over recent months. And as you say, yes, they've lost about £10 million in a year, when actually other estate agencies, traditional agents that charge a percentage fee at the end of the transaction, have all had the best year that they've had in property history.
Well, it's very new to the market anyway, and of course, earlier into its business, we had the pandemic, which really did hit house sales and the movement on the house market completely, didn't it?
Well, it did initially. So the property market was closed down for 3 or 4 months at the beginning of the pandemic. But actually, then if you remember back to Rishi Sunak's stamp duty holiday, that really accelerated the property market and actually led last year to transactions up about 40% on normal. So we saw about 1.4 million housing transactions, 1.4 million house sales last year, which is well above the normal of 1 million transactions. So the property market, despite the pandemic, in spite of it, has actually done very, very well over the last year or so. Things will slow down this year a little because obviously that those conditions are now different. Obviously, we're seeing a squeezing in terms of finances and indeed an increase in the cost of mortgages and borrowing. So I think that 2023 is not going to be quite as rosy. But I think, therefore, for businesses like Purple Bricks now that employ a lot of people, don't charge a lot of money, and as I say, even if they don't sell the property, they still charge. I think they're under pressure. And in fact, Purple Bricks' finance director resigned yesterday. Has only been in post for 12 months. And they've, of course, also announced the beginning of a huge redundancy consultation. So they're certainly in trouble.
If the housing market is cooling, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, it's not necessarily good for the economy in some respects. But however, I mean, the house prices now are so beyond the 3.5 times your salary that we used to have, especially if you're trying to get onto the housing ladder. Is it a bad thing if it cools down a little bit?
No, I don't think it's a bad thing. And look, if you're a first-time buyer trying to get on the ladder, then of course, if house prices do fall away a little bit, it makes it a little easier. I'm quite an optimist, though, and I would say a realist when it comes to the property market. I don't think we're going to see house price falls. We will see a bit of a reduction in volume next year. So I'm more of an optimist than most. And actually, I think, Stephen, it depends where mortgage rates settle, because, of course, we've been used to this very abnormal interest rate environment over the last few years, where mortgages have been kind of sub 2% based on a Bank of England base rate of almost zero. Of course, rates have gone up because of the kind of bungled budget, should we call it, from 3 or 4 weeks ago, which obviously now has been well rehearsed in terms of what's happened as a consequence of that. But actually, kind of contrary to popular opinion, mortgage rates are not sky high, and actually they're starting to reduce. In fact, there was an article in the Financial Times yesterday saying that because gilt yields and swap rates have now settled, mainly because of Rishi Sunak being installed in Downing Street, that the cost of mortgages has reduced in the last couple of weeks, and I think will continue to do so. So actually, I don't think we're looking into 2023 at sky-high rates, unaffordable mortgages, and therefore a drop in property values. But if there's an easing, to your point, yes, that's no bad thing. Actually, big house price increases on an annual basis, which we have seen over the last couple of years, are not sustainable. Of course, 10%, 11, 12% per annum property price increases are not sustainable.
OK, we'll leave it there. Actually, that's sort of almost like a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it? So thank you very much for that. It's nice to hear good news occasionally, even if it's just a little tinge of good news. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see how much the average... Oh, no, you see,
Cost
it's
of a house?
interesting. No, Purple Bricks had 500 people employed at a cost of £3 million. That's only that only works out at £6,000 per person. So that I don't know how that works out.
Well, because it's so online, I imagine there are a lot of freelancers just working from home or whatever like that, working on a commission basis.
Well, it's all commission, isn't it, in the housing market like that? Very low salaries and then commission.
We were talking about guilty pleasures, food pleasures earlier. Because do you think, food pleasures. Do you think of the cost of, if you like, an avocado smashed on toast for breakfast in the morning, like what I do? Do you think of the cost of actually the carbon cost, let alone the cost financially, of shipping that avocado from wherever it was grown? Or a banana on your cornflakes,
bananas,
like that. Anyway, guilty food pleasures have come out in general. Sue in Lincolnshire, morning Sue, says mine is chocolate. A lot of people love their chocolate. John in Nottingham says my guilty food is homemade cold apple pie and carnation.
Oh, carnation. Delish. You cannot beat carnation.
And actually, apple pie when it's cold is lovely.
Lovely, yeah. I mean, that sounds perfect to me, John. Geraldine says she's with me. Beef and tomato pot noodle with an extra dollop of ketchup. I don't use the ketchup. I put a spoon of onion gravy powder in.
Oh, I've never tried a pot noodle. Are they really nice?
Oh, yeah.
They're very easy, aren't they, I suppose?
Oh, yeah, so nice.
Lorraine says, my guilty food pleasure is smoked haddock. That's very good for you.
Yeah.
But Paul, this is not good for you. My guilty food is Kellogg's Fruit Loops. I don't think there's anything good about Fruit Loops, is there? Yes. But they have to be the US version, Paul says. You can only buy them from the American sweet shop importers, and they're £7 a box.
Oh,
wow,
ouch.
That really is a guilty food pleasure.
Jim, I'm with you on this, Jim. Toasted cheese with pepper. I like pepper on my cheese like that, and a large cup of tea. Can I beat it for breakfast on a cold day?
Aye. And Shelley says, my guilty pleasure is crusty bread, a fresh baguette or white farmhouse with lashings of butter. Nothing else needed. Just make sure the butter is about half an inch thick.
Yeah.
Yummy.
With you on that. You've all
That's
got
very
some
guilty, that
very
is.
good ideas, apart from the haddock, because I don't eat fish, Lorraine. But everyone else,
people
good.
love their haddock, smoked haddock.
Yeah. Well, let us know what yours is. Our GB Views at gbnews.uk. And we've got all the sport heading your way in a couple of minutes with Paul Coyte. We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
"7:31, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Paul Coit is with us to take us through the weekend's biggest sports stories. What's going on then?
Good morning.
Good morning.
There's quite a bit that went on last night, Match. We've got Europa League, because the Champions League was earlier on in the week. Europa League, Manchester United beat Sheriff Tiraspol.
Oh, my favourite.
From yeah, I know it's your favourite. They're just your favourite Moldovan team, though, aren't they? Or just generally, they're a great. They're a great. So, Cristiano Ronaldo was back with a goal, but there's a little controversy, and I always like a little controversy, especially when it involves showboating. Now, showboating was done by Anthony, the Brazilian player, and what he did. Now, this happened with Richarlison for Spurs against Nottingham Forest a couple of weeks ago, where he got the ball, and the ball came to him, and he did a little keepy-uppy, and then played the ball, and actually got tackled very harshly straight after that. So there's a lot of people that are saying, well, this is disgraceful, this is disrespectful to the other side. So Anthony gets the ball, and what he does like a little pirouette twice with the ball, spins round, and then as he passes it, he kicks the ball out, which everybody sort of laughed at because the thing is showing off. Yeah. So has showing off got a place in football is what I'm trying to work out.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think so?
That's the only reason I watch.
Oh, it's the showing off that you like?
It's for the brilliant goals and the brilliant saves. Yeah, those little flairish play. That's what I love.
It was flary, probably bordering on showing off, bordering on the showboatedness.
Don't you think that's nice? Don't
you know
find
what?
That cool?
I don't mind it. I really don't. I think it's quite funny, though, the fact that he kicked the ball out, which was the easy part of it, and it was, but then you get teams go, well, this is disrespectful to the other side. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. But you know what? It's all entertainment, so why the heck not?
Yeah.
Well, why not?
Why the heck not?
Arsenal have got to reset, haven't they?
They do have to reset. As you heard, Mikel Arteta was saying that. I know, and because it was a bad result for them at PSV Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Arsenal have been looking very good, but they need to finish the top of their group, which would then avoid them going into playoffs, and they'll go straight into the last 16. It will just avoid them having to play too many games. So not a good result, and they were well beaten by PSV yesterday, as I know you saw. And then also in the Conference League, West Ham as well did very well, beat Silkeborg of Denmark 1-0, which means they will finish top of their group and they'll be fine going into theirs. Okay. So that was everything from last night. Now cricket, the huge day for cricket. Now there's two games which are going on in the T20 World Cup. It's Ireland versus Afghanistan because Ireland beat England last time out just a couple of days ago. England have already beaten Afghanistan, but that has been rained off. So that's not happening. But at 9 o'clock this morning, England are playing at the MCG, which is the Melbourne Cricket Ground, in the T20 World Cup. And it's a huge game between England and Australia because pretty much whoever loses will be out. But it is raining there. So there's a very good chance that we're going to lose a lot of that.
It'll be warm rain, though, won't it?
It will be warm rain. You know what? This is the other thing that I've spoken to cricketers about and say, well, why can't you play in the rain? I know. Is it too dangerous? Because every other sport
they do play in the rain.
Doesn't get rain, and they can't play in the rain. I don't know whether it's like dangerous, where the ball skids off too much.
They're just delicate, aren't they? They're delicate
it's
little
just not
flowers.
British. They need to go in and munch on their cucumber sandwiches.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I think that's part of the whole thing.
I've learned so much about the glamour and sandwiches.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's like Noel Coward said. Probably they're the most delicate of flowers.
I think they probably are.
Do you think so? I don't think they would agree with me. I'll be in big trouble for this.
Let's bring out the girls, should we?
Well, yeah. Well, it's England-Australia again, but this time in the Women's Rugby Union World Cup. Now, this one, I think, has probably flown a little under the radar more than it should do because England are a fantastic rugby union side when it comes to the women and the best in the world. Now, the World Cup is being played in New Zealand. Now, the game against Australia, which is the quarter-final, it's scheduled to kick off 1:30 a.m. our time, which would then mean, now I'm going to try and, because I always have trouble with the spring forward and the full back, the second half, therefore, would be played before the first half.
What?
No.
Because if the game kicks off at 1:30 a.m. our time, the clocks go back Saturday night.
At 2.
So then the second half would start at 2:15. The clocks would then go back, which would mean the second half would start at 1:15, even though it was 1:30 when the game started.
Yeah,
Does that make any sense whatsoever?
They'd still play the first half first and the second half.
They would. The game would still go on as normal, but as far as the clocks go, I'm just trying to confuse the whole situation.
The first half would start at 1:30 and the second half would start at 1:15.
Correct.
Oh, that's very clever.
It's not bad, is it? I quite like that. So, yeah, it's a little clock
So,
thing.
actually, that would be quite difficult if you're trying to set your recorder to record it.
Yes, there are no
That
VCRs
might be
now, and
really
they don't have those anymore.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
That's true, you don't have to, do you?
I think you'll be okay.
No.
Or you could just stay up and watch the whole thing.
Well, yes.
It does mean, though, we get an extra hour in bed.
Extra hour in bed.
Which is lovely.
Is that tonight,
So
then?
there you go. No, that is Saturday.
So
Saturday night
into
going
Sunday.
into Sunday.
Yeah.
Right.
It
So,
always
yeah.
is. Change of clocks is all Saturday night.
So when you're in on Sunday, then you're going to be fresher.
They
than you
always
normally
do that
would be.
changing of the clocks, Saturday night through Sunday, because they think nobody works on a Sunday morning.
Yes.
So it's not a disaster if you're up
Well,
late.
there's a campaign coming. I can feel that that's on the
Or
way.
up early.
Lovely.
I've got one more very quick one for
go
you.
on then.
Camilla Valieva. Do you remember the Russian skater we spoke about back in the Winter Olympics? 15-year-old, and she was banned.
Yes.
Well, I say she was banned, but she competed, and when she was in the ceremony,
terrible form.
that's when they announced that she was tested positive for drugs. And then went into the singles, and it was a disaster for her because it's so much pressure for a 15-year-old. But as far as the Russian, I mean, it's interesting. They call it the Russian Anti-Doping Agency. I don't know whether they use the anti all the time, but they've actually worked. They're actually not going to reveal to the World Anti-Doping Agency the results of the test, which, let's face it, is not really a huge surprise. But again, there's so much talk about drugs in sport at the moment, and with her, it was a heart drug that was usually taken by people over 60, and of course we've got Conor Benn with that fertility drug, which is so it's difficult to argue in those situations when you get people that you've got. They would call them drugs cheats, but when it's like situations where it's like in an inhaler or if it's in a tea, and then there's substances that can't be taken by athletes, that's one thing. But when you've got those situations, it's kind of hard to argue, isn't it? And the whole Conor Benn is rumbling on as well.
The Conor Benn one is particularly hard to
swallow.
Yes, it is. Yes,
actually, interesting. Just on a sports note,
Yeah.
the guy who has ghost written Prince Harry's book, which is just called Spare.
He didn't write it himself, then?
No, it's ghost written by this guy called J.R. Moehringer, who's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and he wrote the Andre Agassi memoir.
Oh, right.
Which looks almost exactly the same.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's called Open, and it's just got a sort of very barefaced shot of Andre Agassi. I'll get the picture for you a bit so you can know. It looks almost exactly the same as Prince Harry's. It made him millions and millions, #1 bestseller, and that was just about Andre Agassi.
That's amazing, because I have read chapter 4 of the Harry one, How I Won Wimbledon. So that is probably I am now. That's amazing how the links are there.
This ghostwriter said he delved so deeply into Agassi and his family background that the player later compared it to being on a psychiatrist's couch for days at a time.
Oh, for goodness'
sake! If he's done that to Prince Harry.
I wonder if Andre's was edited heavily. We'll see.
Yeah, I wonder. Fascinating.
Paul, thank you.
Have a lovely weekend. Don't forget,
1:30.
1:30. Then 1:50.
Then 1:50.
That's very complicated.
We've got much more to come for you, including the papers in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
7:43 morning. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV and your radio.
Let's go through the papers now with former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and political consultant Emma Burnell. And a very good morning. Thanks for coming back. Emma, kick us off with COP27 and the fact that Rishi's not going.
Yeah, he's not going to COP27, but he's also got rid of Alok Sharma and the Climate Minister from the Cabinet. So it feels like there's quite a big movement against the emphasis that certainly Boris Johnson's government had on climate change, which I think is a real shame and a real mistake, actually. I think there's a real space for Rishi's whole I'm the grown-up in the room position to actually show that you can be really keen on climate change and not be a Just Stop Oil type protester. Yeah, and really, anti-climate change is mainstream now. And I think it's really important. And also, we were talking earlier about energy security. The things that we need to address climate change are a big part of that. And I've also, he's said previously he wants to have a huge focus on R&D. Well, what does he think they're going to research and develop? We have such an opportunity to be world leaders.
But you don't need Alok Sharma to move that along. What
did
he do at COP26 apart from cry at the end?
Well, I mean, he cried because he was trying desperately to work behind the scenes, and sadly, we didn't get as much as we wanted.
You like that
Sorry,
one?
yeah, I did like that one, and I think you're right. I'm not sure that the Prime Minister... Well, let's remove that. The Prime Minister doesn't need to attend, OK? But there are an awful lot of things going on that require his attention. Now, I agree that we need to look at R&D, especially in renewables, but does it require a cabinet position for a minister? As Alok Sharma can do his job without having to be attending cabinet. You can look at what's going on at COP. I'm not buying that it's so important that you have to be there. As long as you put policies in place in your country, we are doing our bit, and there are other countries across the world that aren't. And I do wonder sometimes, going to these conferences, sitting there crying, as Stephen just mentioned, and navel-gazing doesn't actually get you anywhere. And I always think it's a bit of a waste of time if you're not going to take stuff forward afterwards, which we haven't.
But what does it say about Britain in that our Prime Minister isn't going, and neither is Prince Charles, who is now King? He's not going either. So Britain is being very poorly represented?
Well, that's it. I mean, this is an international conference. It's about international negotiation and representation. And I think it's not just the should he, shouldn't he go to this one meeting. I think there's a lot of signalling happening with the not going to the meeting and the reduction in the roles just before we have the new budget that we know is going to be about cutting spending. It just seems to be signalling how much this is being reduced as a priority, and that's what concerns me.
I don't know. All these COP meetings, everyone flies in, burning huge amounts of fuel. And
actually, I was talking to an MP who's going very slowly to COP. So there are people trying, I do promise.
Let's have a look at big tech growth, Claire, on the Financial Times, which is all slowing down.
It is, and it's quite interesting that investors' love of big tech companies is fading away. And I think it's incumbent upon those companies to be able to show where their money is going to come from, not just say it is cloud-based, it is wonderful, artificial intelligence is the way forward. They don't have any plans. And it seems that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta are the worst culprits of this, for not telling people where the money will come from. It's just, it will come. And people look back to the dot-com bubble of, over a decade ago, where people got very, very burnt with tech companies. It's very easy to set one up. It's very easy to say that you have all of this capability, but if it isn't there, then that money is just gone. So I think it's not a surprise, and especially when everybody is cutting back on that kind of spending, to put your money into something that you can't physically see, hold, understand necessarily, I think that moment has really gone. So those tech companies either need to come up with some coherent plan to assure us all that if they do have artificial intelligence, it's being used for the right reasons, they're not just mining data and selling it, or that they physically have a product that will benefit the population as a whole.
Meta's losing billions, isn't it, at the minute? Because, well, he's pumping billions into it and nothing's actually coming out the other end.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the tech bubble of I think it was the early 2000s, and that was a kind of free-for-all Wild West thing. I think what's happened now is slightly different in that instead of it being the plaything of lots of mad young entrepreneurs, it's now the plaything of about 3 blokes just wandering around being super billionaires going, I know everything and everything's going to go. And actually the markets are finally waking up and going, actually, I don't think you do know everything. The metaverse that you're completely obsessed with doesn't seem to be working, doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. No one really knows what it's for.
No, I think there's a lack of trust now. Certainly I feel it. You worry, don't you, about handing over all your data or using a card and then suddenly things come up charged to your card and you can't figure out what they are at all. And the trust has gone.
And I think we are wary and wary of that. There's a saying that if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. And I think we're more and more aware of that when it comes to Facebook. And I don't know about you, but my Facebook experience is worse and worse. With the same adverts repeated and awful stuff that I'm never going to click on. And I feel like it both Facebook and Twitter have just seemed to be tipping into that deeply uncool
you feel like you're being conned all the time.
Yeah,
you do.
You're being tricked into an advert or
you
tricked
are
into subscribing
to clicking on something and then it takes you off somewhere else. And I think it's a really toxic space as well, especially when you look at Twitter. And we do use it for work purposes, majority of us here. It's a really toxic space.
It is.
And they're not doing anything about that.
Thankfully, we can ignore it now because we're out of time. Thank you both very much indeed. We'll talk about chirping birds in the real world.
Yes, I want to hear about that. That sounds
cool. It'll make us all feel better about it.
Absolutely. Much better than Twitter.
It will.
Yes, true.
Absolutely. Anyway, now, a bill to change the law on selling drugs to under 16 is going to be debated in Parliament later on today.
Yeah, it's being led by the North Yorkshire MP, Kevin Hollinrake, who's worked together with campaigner Kerry Roberts. Now, her 15-year-old daughter, Leah Hayes, died in 2019 after she took a Class A drug with a group of friends.
And the bereaved mum is pushing for a new regulation which would make selling drugs to under 16s a different offence with a longer jail term.
Over to Anna Riley now for that story.
Leah's Memorial, a place where her mum Kerry can remember her 15-year-old daughter, whose life was tragically cut short. Leah took 2 tablets of MDMA at a park, which within hours had killed her. The drugs were supplied by 2 older teenagers who served 6 months in jail. And ever since, Kerry has been campaigning for Leah's Law to increase sentences for criminals who supply to under 16s.
Leah was full of life. She had so many aspirations. She wanted to do so many things, and her life was wasted. And her life was a waste of a life. And it was because I didn't know things. She didn't know things, and she made a mistake. And with that mistake, she paid with her life. My world ended when she died. I was devastated. I'm still devastated. I think about her every day. And I think about the lady she'd be now. She'd be a young woman. Our kids need protection. protection. They need more protection. It's a law to do other things with under 16s, but not to sell them Class A drugs.
Kevin Hollinrake, MP for Thurston Malton, has taken on Kerry's plight and hopes that a change in the law could help protect young people from harm.
Supplying drugs to young people is not deemed any more serious offence than dealing drugs to an adult, and that has to be wrong. And so therefore I was very happy to support Kerry's campaign and will continue to do so. There is a much bigger picture here than simply who's dealing drugs to children, but nevertheless, if they are, to my mind, you should face more serious consequences.
As well as petitioning for a change in the law, Kerry's also launched a campaign which encourages parents to talk to their teenagers about the use of drugs and alcohol.
Parents are naive. Our children get this. They get this after school, they get it during school. They can get hold of drugs easily, as easy as ordering a pizza. And it's scary, but it happens. The campaign we're doing is called Not My Child, because every parent thinks, my child wouldn't do that. My daughter, my son wouldn't do that. But it happens.
By protecting others from the pain she felt, Kerry Roberts' fight will not only save lives, but will also keep her daughter's legacy alive. Anna Riley, GB News, Northallerton.
It's a tragic story there, and a very campaigning mum. Well done. I was talking a bit earlier about the Prince Harry book as being written by the same ghostwriter who wrote one about Andre Agassi. And if you look at the two books there, they're almost done exactly the same style, aren't they? Andre Agassi's one, written quite a few years ago now, bestseller, Open, with him looking straight at camera. And they've obviously gone for exactly the same look with Prince Harry's book. That Buckingham Palace is now quaking in its boots about.
It will be. It will be. Look, don't go anywhere. We'll talk more about that coming up. Plus, David Mellor's take on the windfall tax.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain moving north today, grey skies accompanying the wet weather, but brightening up later from the south. And it will be warm once again for many. That warmth arriving across British shores from the south-southwest. But what's also arriving with the warmth is wet weather. That wet weather now already into western parts of the country, courtesy of an active cold front. So a wet start for much of the west, but especially western Scotland, Northern Ireland. A few hours of particularly heavy rain here could cause some trouble on the roads, I think. Nevertheless, the rain across England, Wales, Northern Ireland clears up by the afternoon. Brighter skies follow here. It pushes into central and northern Scotland. And it stays breezy across the UK. But that breeze, coming from the warm direction of the southwest, brings temperatures into the high teens, perhaps even low 20s. So it's a warm but fairly changeable day once again. And northern Scotland keeps the rain into the evening, but elsewhere drying up for a time with some clear spells before further spells of rain move up from the south. That rain heavy and persistent in the southwest as well as for Wales. More showery, I think, for the southeast and staying dry to the north, with some clear spells giving temperatures into the single figures for Scotland, northern England, as well as Northern Ireland, but generally staying mild elsewhere. And it's a dull and wet start to the day for England, Wales, Northern Ireland on Saturday. Those outbreaks of rain do move north fairly quickly. I think they'll linger for a time across Wales and the southwest. But brighter skies ahead of the rain and some sunshine appearing to the southeast will mean that temperatures again will be rising to well above average for the time of year. Could even see 22 Celsius in the southeast, for example. Sunday, a bright and breezy day, further heavy showers in places, particularly towards the northwest. Monday sees more wind and rain, but throughout the outlook, it does stay very mild.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Prime Minister considers higher taxes and more public spending cuts as he tries to balance Britain's financial deficit.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 28th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV, your radio and online, so wherever you are and whatever you're up to this morning, you can take us with you. Here are your headlines.
Rishi Sunak is looking at raising taxes as a budget delay apparently saves the Treasury £15 billion. The Prime Minister also wants to implement sweeping spending cuts, following some improvement apparent in the economic picture.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has completed his takeover of Twitter. It brings to an end one of the most high-profile buyout sagas in recent history.
And Northern Ireland is facing a snap election after deadline talks failed to elect a new speaker and break political deadlock.
And also coming up, we'll bring you the latest results from our GB News People's Poll. We're asking if you think Rishi Sunak is the right man for number 10. Well, if you disagree, it's a bit late, but we'll tell you how you voted in just a minute.
And as ever, you know you can join in any of our discussions. Do email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, Rishi Sunak's climate pledge is under scrutiny because he's not going to COP27 now, amid speculation that he could extend the windfall tax on energy companies.
Yes, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are reportedly drawing up plans in the autumn budget around public spending cuts and tax increases worth, they would hope, up to £50 billion in a bid to fill that £50 billion gaping hole.
Well, it all comes as climate activists and MPs have been urging the new Prime Minister to go further on the windfall tax as oil and gas giants see their profits grow.
Joining us now in the studio, former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor. And a very good morning. Lovely to see you. So, yes, I mean, Rishi Sunak's problem is how to fill that £50 billion gaping hole in the economy. Windfall tax going to be one of them?
Well, this is what I find outrageous, and that is that Shell, who had profits of $8 billion in the last quarter, double what it was this time last year, have not paid a penny in tax on it. And you think to yourself, why do we employ these massive brains in the Treasury? And then they can't get a grip of this. I know. But mind you, one of the most disillusioning things in my life was that, when I was young, I used to think, I don't need to worry about the world because somewhere in the middle of London are people who know the answers to everything. Yeah. When I got to the middle of London and into some of those places, I suddenly realised they don't know very much. It's like William Goldman, the screenwriter, his first law of Hollywood was nobody knows anything. And I think you could say that about a Whitehall as well.
But how can it be that, I mean, there are arguments against windfall tax saying, it stifles R&D. These companies did very badly over a period of time. Now they're recouping their losses, all that sort of thing. How can it be they're not paying any tax at all?
It's ridiculous. But because basically we know that the reason why they have made the money is by being there. It'd be lovely for us, wouldn't it? We don't have to do anything. As long as we're there, someone's going to put a lot of money in our pockets. And so basically, a windfall tax is about circumstances over which you have no control, but which blows the wind in your direction. And I think they've got to get a grip of this. Because, look, I was Chief Secretary of Treasury many years ago, unfortunately not so long ago that I don't remember all about it. And I mean, it's terrible. 50 billion black hole, that's a big black hole. And so there's very little optionality, because if the international markets lose confidence in the UK, and already we're paying far more in terms of the interest rates on our borrowing. So we're back in a situation that I remember very well from some of my years in politics, where you think, well, we're going to spend that on health, we're going to spend that. But in fact, one of the big 2 or 3 expenditures for a current government is paying the interest on the debt that has been accumulated. And so there's really very little optionality. If they don't nail people like Shell, then they're going to nail the rest of us. And I'm not sure I feel like being nailed, do you?
No, not really. Wouldn't it be better, rather than a windfall tax, wouldn't they be better actually coming up with a different tax structure for these companies?
Of course. And we already know that the horrendous thing where, if you go and buy your coffee, you're likely to find you're buying it from a company that doesn't pay any tax in the UK. And I don't know why it has proved to be so difficult. But the reality is, you see, what is disappointing, I know you'll come to your people's poll, and I won't anticipate that, but you see, the Sunak bounce, as we will soon hear, is not that great. The fact that there is now a competent person in the Treasury and a competent person as Prime Minister isn't making that much difference. Now, if the Conservatives do not have the public's confidence on running the economy, they're finished.
Yeah, because that's always been the flag waving.
That's right. And it was always people always say, well, the Tories are not very nice people, are they? But
at least they know their money.
At least they know their money, yeah.
But it's been said that that the present Chancellor, I'm just trying to remember his name, Jeremy Hunt. Sorry. It's very difficult sometimes.
Now, you don't remember, the BBC often have problems. It's Hunt.
Hunt, yes. He has apparently been in talks with every living previous Chancellor, I think, going right back at least to George Osborne.
Yes.
Why do you think he's been meeting previous Chancellors?
Oh, I think that's not a bad idea, because there ought to be some esprit de corps between Chancellors, particularly those around for some time. But of course, that has led to headlines that I don't know whether you've picked up on the paper review. A 23 billion black hole likely to be created by some of those smart property taxes that Osborne put in his time. But look, essentially, what we have to deal with is a public expenditure crisis. And Sunak is not, his hands are not that clean. I mean, I personally, let's be quite clear where I stand, I think he's an infinitely better and more well-qualified Prime Minister than Liz Truss. But when he was first Chancellor, a lot of money was spent on all these various ways of trying to protect people from COVID. And we're talking about many billions, and a lot of those billions were used for fraud. And as a result of all of that, the build-up of the debt has been enormous, and he has got to show that he has learnt something as a result of all of that. Because we can't, there isn't the money to throw around anymore. And maybe they thought once they got through COVID, the pressure would be off. Well, then, of course, they walk straight into the
inevitable debt.
Well,
yeah,
what about the options? We were talking, one of our guests earlier on was saying, you know, time for a bonfire of the quangos again.
Yes, although there's always, you know, one of the great ways, and opposition is very good at this, the Labour Party's particularly always been spectacularly good at this, you talk about efficiency savings. That's just an evasion, because at the end of the day, there are no efficiency savings. The fact, what we have to recognise in this country is the inflation is eroding the power of money. The public expenditure effects of, for instance, increasing all benefits in line with inflation means you're never going to get rid of inflation. But, you know, I can understand why the argument is raised, oh, well, we can't have these people not having a proper compensation. But if you properly compensate everybody out of public money, you run up a huger deficit and you never get rid of inflation. That's the problem.
I mean, Rishi Sunak has said, and he made it clear throughout the summer, didn't he, that tackling inflation was his priority.
Yes.
Explain to us again, how do you tackle it? How do you start to bring inflation down? We know interest rates going up are part of that, but why and how does it all work?
Well, I think you've got to drive down public expenditure. And this is where, you know, tough though it may be, if you don't keep on top of, for instance, wage demands, and wage demands are coming in thick and fast all over the place. And if you don't keep on top, look, the number of people in our society who are now, you know, they are not wealth generating. They do not earn money, but they expect to get their automatic uplift paid for by the likes of us. Well, if we continue to subsidise all these benefits at the same rate as prices are going up, it's a simple answer to that. You never get rid of inflation. And, you know, it comes back to, I think it was a favourite phrase of dear old John Major. Maybe we should bring it back. Ta-da! There is no gain without pain. And that's the situation.
There seems to be an awful lot of gain for some people without pain.
Oh, yeah, of course. We know that only too well.
I mean, we look at the energy companies at the moment. And I remember, I mean, during the days of Thatcher and Major, they were talking about their belief in philanthropy from the top and trickle-down economics. You know, the rich can be rich, but it trickles down. The rich can be very rich, but they should be encouraged to be philanthropic. It didn't happen, did it?
Well, to some degree, but never on the scale it had happened in America. But look, I know I probably can't talk about the poll.
No, don't. You'll ruin our next guest.
I won't. But I tell you that if anybody expected there would be a big bounce back in the direction of the Tories, because, you know, I mean, whatever mistakes Sunak may have made as Chancellor, he's a grown-up. He's a seriously articulate, seriously well-trained economist. He knows what's going on. And if they thought, well, as soon as he comes here, you know, powie, everything's going to be all right, it isn't.
No, but it's 12 months down the line, maybe.
Yes, that's what we have to hope.
How do you see the future of the Conservative Party?
Well, I think the one big advantage for the Tories, you know, I keep looking back to the period between 92 and 97, and in particular, the way in which, despite most of that period being a well-run economy, the Tories were thrashed and lost more than half of their seats. The reason why that happened, an optimistic friend of mine advised, was because people believed at that point in Tony Blair, and they don't believe in the Labour Party as currently led, and
So
that's
you mean
not
just
going
by
to change.
default?
Yeah, I think that
the Tories will go on just by
the
default.
Tories will go on, but can the Tories actually get back public confidence? And once again, as a trailer for your poll, anyone who looks at that, who is an optimistic Tory, well, maybe they should look away, you know, and do the washing up or something, because there's no reason to believe that this is going to be very easy. But the fact that Labour is nothing like as popular as the Labour Party in opposition in the 90s under Tony Blair was, means, you could say the Labour lead is a mile wide but an inch thick. That has to be the Tories' hope.
OK. David, for now, as always, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
And as David has been heralding, it's time now for the People's Poll.
So
Well,
this week...
Fascinating.
It is, yes. The views on Rishi Sunak remains divided. 30% of people saying they are favourable towards the Prime Minister, 40% saying they're not.
And on whether Tory MPs have betrayed their members by appointing Sunak as PM, 27% of those asked said they agree, 44% said the opposite.
And finally, how they'd vote in the next general election. 58% said, well, they certainly would vote. 10% wouldn't vote. Heck, I always think in a democracy, if you don't
You've
vote,
got to vote.
well, you deserve what you get. Let's talk to academic and professor of politics, Matt Goodwin, who's behind our poll, as always. Matt, good to see you. What's the takeout point for you out of all of this?
Well, good morning. Great to be with you again. The takeout point for me is that there's a little bit of evidence of what you might call a Rishi bounce, but there's not much of it. If you look at our numbers compared to last week, where our viewers might remember we had the Conservatives on a historic low of 14% of the national vote. That was, Stephen, the lowest number in British polling history. This week, after the appointment of Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, we now have the Conservatives up 6 points, but they're still at 20%. So they're 20% of the national vote compared to Labour, which is now on 31 points. So it's still giving Labour a commanding lead in the polls. It means that it's early days for Rishi Sunak. He's going to be hoping that he can establish a much more commanding lead in the weeks and months ahead. But so far, not masses amounts of evidence of a big bounce.
No, I mean, if you look at the next question as well, who would you trust to manage the economy? Rishi Sunak now at 19%. Keir Starmer still doing very well, and he's not even tried and trusted.
Well, let's just remember, this is the so-called ace card for Rishi Sunak. He's the guy who can re-establish economic credibility and competence. That's his big pitch to the Conservative Party. He is, without doubt, doing better than Liz Truss. When we asked the same question last week, only 5% of the country said, I trust Liz Truss with the economy. This week, we've got Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives on 19%. So doing much better than Liz Truss, but still trailing behind the Labour Party and Keir Starmer, who have a significant lead on the economy, which, of course, as we know, is the most important issue facing the country. So if the Conservatives don't close that gap, and David was just explaining to you why he thinks they're struggling to do that, it will be lights out for the Conservatives at the next election. They have to re-establish some leadership on these economic questions.
But what I find slightly worrying is the next point, looking at immigration, with them saying, the people who you've polled saying actually think Keir Starmer is going to perform better on the immigration issue, which seems very strange.
Well, we wanted to ask voters, look, who do you trust on immigration? Because look at the newspaper headlines this week. We've got that worrying data about Albanians crossing the channel, now the biggest group in the small boats. We've got this rumour of a rift between Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman on the immigration question. So we said, look, who do you trust? The thing that stands out for me most with that question, actually, Stephen, is that more than half the country don't choose the Labour Party or the Conservative Party. More than half of all voters are saying, actually, I don't really know who to back on immigration. Now, to me, that gives me some pretty good evidence that we have a public who are deeply disillusioned on that question, not happy with how it's being managed at all. And for the Labour Party to be ahead of the Conservative Party on immigration is, again, another worrying sign of just how weak this Conservative brand has become over the last few weeks and months. So this is a big warning shot for the Conservative Party.
What about the personal brand of the man we used to call Rishi? You asked what is your opinion of Rishi Sunak, the personal opinion. What do they think?
Well, look, if I was in Team Sunak, I'd be saying early days, you're re-establishing your brand in British politics. The last time people really zoomed in on you was during the COVID-19 crisis. There's a lot of work to do. And indeed, our data supports that. If we ask voters, do you have a favourable view of Rishi Sunak or an unfavourable view, most voters are breaking for unfavourable. His net rating is -10, which makes him actually a lot stronger than Liz Truss. She was way down in the doldrums. Rishi Sunak is still, though, in net negative territory, meaning more people dislike him currently than like him. And Keir Starmer's ratings, remember, have been improving a little bit in recent weeks and months. He's moved into some positive territory. But this is, again, I think, a sign that if I were advising Rishi Sunak, I'd be saying, look, what's your brand? What's your image? What's your message to the British people? You've got to now establish a conversation with them, a direct conversation, and you've got to explain to the country what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're going to do it. And that's something Liz Truss, of course, never really managed to do during her premiership, something that, in a way, Boris Johnson also struggled with after that big 2019 election win. So there's opportunity for Rishi Sunak, there's room for manoeuvre, but his ratings are still net negative, which to me as a pollster is ringing some alarm bells.
Well, then, yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because obviously the gap between him and Keir Starmer, when it comes to that personal level, it's nowhere near as big as the gap between the two parties in as far as who you would vote for.
I think that's true. I think there are, as I say, lots of things for Rishi Sunak to play with here. But as you said earlier on, Stephen, in your piece, I think we all know that the landscape of the country, of politics, is going to change radically over the next 6 months. This is a guy who is shortly going to be introducing, I would bet my house on it, fairly widespread tax rises and some significant public spending cuts. So the hard bit of this premiership is yet to come. And so he wants to start in as strong a position as possible because his ratings and the Conservative ratings will take a hit. No doubt about that. They're going to take a hit over the next 6 months. So he wants to really begin in as strong a place as possible just to withstand some of that backlash from voters who say, well, hang on a minute, now I'm really struggling with this cost of living crisis and money is being taken away from some key public services. And that's going to make 2023 very, very difficult for the Conservative Party.
OK, Matt, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. David's still here. I just wonder, with what Matt was saying there, and it is going to be hard, the British people are not stupid. But they're going to, aren't they going to look at this and say, haven't we all reached that point? And I know it's harder for some than it is for others, a lot harder. But aren't people going to say, I know it's got to be tough, but this is the medicine we've all got to take?
Yeah, that's what we have to hope. And that's why Rishi Sunak will need to develop rhetorical skills and also put himself up there in the window and say, trust me, I can do this.
Doesn't he also have to sort of show a light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh,
He's
yeah.
going to give us a harsh message, which he's been doing consistently. Things are going to get tough. He needs to actually show us how and when it's going to get better.
Exactly, and that's why a lot of pressure will also be put on Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt has no experience in the Treasury, but Jeremy Hunt is a grown-up, and Jeremy Hunt knows how to deal with tough situations because he voluntarily, a lot of the time, spent 6 years as Secretary of State for Health. I mean, I can tell you, to spend 6 months as Secretary of State for Health, and I was Minister for Health, is a terrible job. And the fact that he brought that upon himself suggests that the two of them together, they're probably the best team the Conservatives could assemble at this moment. But what your poll shows, and I'm not saying this to flatter your pollsters or this station, but I think these are very interesting because they go to the heart of what people are concerned about. There is a Rishi bounce, but it's not a very big one. The scale of the problems that Sunak and his team face are there on these two sheets of paper. But, you know, a week is a long time in politics, and 2 years, hopefully, is even longer.
When do you think he'd call a general election?
The moment that they finally drag him out of number 10. You can't have an early election with these kind of figures. You simply can't.
He's just got to hang on in there for as long as possible.
And hope that people will see. You see, I come back to what my consolatory friend was trying to say to me, Tony Blair was a very powerful black brand. People believed in Tony Blair. I don't think they believe in the present Labour Party, and they certainly don't believe in Keir Starmer, who, you know, Keir Starmer
didn't land a punch at PMQs.
Exactly. He's one of those most despised of all people, as am I, a lawyer. And a lawyer in politics, there's never much confidence in lawyers in politics because it's felt they're just arguing a case. Starmer has very little passion. Starmer has very little obvious qualifications to do difficult things like run the economy. He is the difference, so my optimistic friend was saying to me, between where the Tories are now and where they were when John Major was right down and when Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were poised to come in.
Interesting. David, thank you very much indeed, as always. Love to get your thoughts on that. What do you think? Don't go anywhere, though. Get emailing away. We'll go through some of those views in a couple of minutes when we're back.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales,
and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
8:27 morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, Northern Ireland is heading to the polls after politicians in Stormont failed to come together to elect a new speaker.
Secretary of State Chris Heaton-Harris must now call an election to be held within 12 weeks.
Shall we head to Westminster now and try and find out what on earth is going on? Because we're joined by the Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Peter Kyle. Good morning, Peter. Hello. Thank you for joining us. That simple question, what on earth is going and what will resolve things in Stormont?
Well, Northern Ireland is always simultaneously very complex and also quite straightforward. So there are some straightforward challenges we face at the moment. Firstly, that the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, they've been expressing problems and concerns with the protocol for quite some time now. They did so over a year ago from a position of being in this Assembly, but the government at the time over here in Westminster didn't really engage with those concerns and ignored those concerns, and they got more and more fractious about it until they came out of the Assembly. And now things have got quite dysfunctional because, unfortunately, in the 6 months that we have had since the last set of elections, we've had 3 Prime Ministers, 3 Secretaries of State for Northern Ireland, and no negotiations or progress on the protocol. So all of the fundamentals that underpin peace, prosperity and progress in Northern Ireland just haven't been there. And also a crucial relationship that we don't talk enough about is the relationship between the Irish government and the UK government, which has reached an all-time low in recent months. These are the circumstances that provide the framework for peace and prosperity and progress in Northern Ireland. They haven't been there the last 6 months, so we need to make sure that after we're the other side of these elections, that we make sure we make the most of this the next 6 month period, and not squander it as we've done, or the Tory government have done in the last 6 months.
But it's what becomes more complicated is that, although, as you say, all the issues around the Northern Ireland Protocol, but it's actually also to do with not electing a speaker, isn't it?
No, it is. So the settlement from the Good Friday Agreement established the power-sharing arrangements. The institutions of democracy under the Good Friday Agreement are the Assembly and the Executive. So the Assembly, of course, is all of those people, those MLAs that are elected all across Northern Ireland to form the Northern Ireland Assembly. But then you also have a First Minister and a Deputy First Minister, both of which must come from each community, the nationalist community and the unionist community. And to have the executive functioning, you must have both of those. So what's happened in the last period is that the DUP withdrew from the executive, which meant the executive collapsed. But then we had elections and the DUP refused to appoint a speaker, which meant that the Assembly couldn't function either. Now, this, of course, is quite dysfunctional. I wish the DUP would go in because I believe that a politician and a political party has most agency when they're actually in the Parliament they're elected to, or the Assembly, and they execute their politics from there. But I've got to say, I do have some sympathy with the DUP on their own terms when you understand them, because they tried to raise their concerns about the protocol very functionally from within the Assembly, but the government at the time here in Westminster wasn't acting on it. They seemed to look the other way, and things deteriorated until things got very dysfunctional. And then in the last 6 months, of course, we've had the chaos here in Westminster with the Tory government and the changes of Prime Minister and policies and the crisis made in Downing Street paid by workers up and down the country. So things have just got worse. We can't move forward and expect all the parties in Northern Ireland to move forward on their own. Things only move forward in Northern Ireland when they have the framework for peace, prosperity and progress, and that can only come from the Irish government and the UK government working together, and also right now tackling the protocol too. Sorry to go on so long, but you understand how complicated these issues are, and it's nice of you to give me the space to explain them in full.
Yeah, but when it boils down to ordinary people, families in Northern Ireland, how is it making them feel? Because for so long it must feel that no matter who they voted for, they feel disenfranchised.
This is outraging. I was there on Monday and I met every party leader there in Stormont, and then spent the afternoon meeting residents, because Northern Ireland faces challenges that other people elsewhere in the UK don't face. 60% of the homes in Northern Ireland are heated by heating oil, not just in the rural countryside, but in the urban areas like Belfast and Derry County and Derry Londonderry. So, you know, I went to a home that is heated in an urban area by heating oil. They're not getting the same support that other people are getting for the rise of costs of gas. And if you think there are very specific economic challenges in Northern Ireland, 44% of families in Northern Ireland have no savings at all, whereas the national average across the United Kingdom is 16%. There's not the resilience we have elsewhere. There are specific challenges, and we need the Assembly and local democracy to be up and running to tackle these issues. You know, most people in Northern Ireland have the same challenges and priorities we have elsewhere. It is the cost of living crisis, it is the public services, and it's very local issues in their communities. So we need to get Stormont up and running, but because it is Stormont, because it's Northern Ireland, we also have in their politics these other more existential issues which have to be tackled so that we can redirect policies to the challenges that people have in Northern Ireland too. We really need a government here that takes this seriously. Rishi Sunak hasn't mentioned Northern Ireland once since he's become Prime Minister. He really needs to get over there and start tackling the challenges that they have.
Peter Kyle, really good to talk to you. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I was in Belfast a couple of months ago, and I can't tell you what the taxi drivers say when you get in. They've got a view on it, and a lot of them blame Brexit as well. They blame everything because they can't believe they've got a local government, there in Stormont that's not actually doing anything.
Not doing anything. Well, let's talk to our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, who joins us now. Morning to you, Doogie. At Stormont, as you can see. I mean, is another election going to make any difference at all, Doogie?
No, it's definitely not, and I was just listening to your former guest there, and he's absolutely right. Northern Ireland, to govern, must have stable frameworks in it. And yesterday and this morning, all the other politicians are up in arms about what's going wrong, and now they want joint authority, and some want just majority rule. These are all things that were negotiated in the Good Friday Agreement. If they would stick to the Good Friday Agreement, we would have a government. But of course, the protocol came into the middle of that. It was to protect that single market inside the EU. This is the only land border with the EU in Britain, and of course it is causing problems. They don't want a border on land, so they've had one down the Irish Sea. The one down the Irish Sea is then stopping goods coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. A lot of our supermarket shelves, etc. here are empty, especially with lost leader goods, because they are coming from Britain. Even things I reported about it, Valentine's Day, flowers, the soil on the flowers, it's not allowed in here without European checks on it. So what we really do have here is a perfect storm of almost childish politics. We have Europeans wanting to enforce this protocol to the very letter, beyond and past where it is, not letting goods in because there's an I instead of a 1. I mean, I have looked at this paperwork myself. It is quite ridiculous. But as long as that continues and continues on, then we have parties here wanting their side, one wanting the other side. The Good Friday Agreement was sold to unionists here as the final answer. It was sold to nationalists as a stepping stone to United Ireland. All this now must be brought into the middle, set on in the plate and looked at and said, here is the actual answer. They need to be talking to each other instead of talking around one another.
OK. Doogie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Do stay with us. More to come, including all the stories making the headlines in this morning's papers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle, Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
8:39 morning to you, watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Time to go through the papers with former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and political consultant Emma Burnell.
Morning to you both.
Right.
Let's start with something jolly, should we? Interest rates are going to rise.
Oh, no, I thought you really were going to start with something jolly.
No.
They are, however, it looks like they're going to go up to 3%, the base rate. But actually, mortgage experts, so this is actually jolly news, but mortgage experts are saying that they think that the banks, etc., have already factored in this rise. So it's not looking like our mortgages will rise, which is the key thing with interest rates.
Do you think? Will they not use it as an excuse?
Well, I mean, there is always that. But actually, they've got this huge backlog because of all the mortgages that they had to suddenly turn around or reject or change. So it looks like they probably won't on this one occasion.
But it means everything else goes up, doesn't it?
But everything else goes up, so it's not totally good news. But we have had, I mean, fundamentally, we've had incredibly low mortgage rates for well over a decade.
But we've got used to it as
and
well.
We
That's
have
the trouble.
the problem is not only have we got used to, we've all banked on it. Those of us who got our mortgage during the last 10 years, which is going to be an awful lot of people, are going to find it really, really hard if things go up so considerably. You always factor in maybe a little bit extra when you renegotiate, but this kind of extra is going to be very hard for a lot of people.
And the real problem is younger people who are looking to get on the ladder for the first time, paying most of their salaries out in rent. The houses aren't being built for them in the first place, so the supply and demand
And rent is so high in some places that you can't save for a deposit, so you can't see a way out of it.
Mind you,
Absolutely.
I
It's a very
did
broken system.
drive past a building site the other day, yesterday I think it was, and they were saying on the billboards outside, we will pay your 5% deposit. Now, that, I don't know, 5% seems low for a deposit these days.
does.
But that's what happened with my first flat. It was one of those companies and they said, we'll pay your deposit. They basically just take it off the
And it
price.
worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked. I mean, I bought a two-bedroom flat for £55,000. I mean, it's quite a long time ago.
Those are the days.
Yes.
But, you know, it's...
But the problem is now is that you're looking at a flat that's probably 300,000. So 5% of that is not a huge amount. You've still got to raise a lot in a mortgage.
Yeah.
And who is going to lend at the moment to that level?
Yeah.
That's the other side of it. And,
And
it's
you know,
so
we've got depressed
disappointing.
salaries, raising rents.
Yeah.
It's just, I wouldn't be.
And
on
the
my 20s
economic
for anything
forecasts
these days.
the economic forecasts are so terrifying that you feel you couldn't take the plunge as a
Precisely.
first-time buyer.
Yeah.
I think you'd be worried.
Yeah.
As a Labour person,
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder what David Mellor was saying, and he made a really valid point in saying, with all these strikes and negotiations over pay and all the rest of it, you can understand why people want more pay. He said if you start putting all the pay up out the public purse to inflation or near inflation, all that will actually achieve is inflation's going to keep getting higher.
I mean, that's the argument that people put, that this is the... that was the problem in the 70s, that the wage inflation drove price inflation. But actually, we haven't had wage inflation. We've had absolutely stagnant wages for a decade, and yet we have price inflation. So I think it's a very hard argument to make to very low pay.
Well, that's what all the striking unions are saying
Exactly.
at the moment, isn't it? Can we get a little happier now and talk about the birds and the bees?
Absolutely.
Who wants to take us away with the birds, first of
I
all?
think that's Emma's bird.
Emma, tell us about birds.
Seeing birds officially makes you happier,
I can believe it.
which is absolutely...
Seeing birds.
Hearing birds in particular. Bird song makes us happier. Now,
Chirpy, chirpy, cheep.
No, I'm going to be singing that all day, Stephen. Thank you very much for that. But yeah, birdsong genuinely lifts the mood. There's been a study that proves that, and I think that's, in part, I think it's to do with the particularly joyous sound of birdsong. But also, there's just that sense that we're part of one planet, part of nature. Even in the heart of a city, you hear birdsong everywhere you go.
It is lovely to hear birdsong. OK, so what about the bees?
Now this was a really good story about bumblebees, just like humans, like to play. And this in particular, there was a bumblebee enjoyed rolling balls for no apparent reason other than just for fun. So it was just one of those sort of very funny things that animals have that sense of fun and playtime, and they're not just there, the work.
I mean, it's great, isn't it? Animals and humans, we all love to play with balls.
Well, actually, that is... but I always find that astonishingly funny. When there are the most dismal, grim reports from Syria or from, places in India where nobody's got anything, they throw a ball into the mix and the kids all start playing.
That's it.
It's just
It doesn't
incredible.
have to be some super toy, the biggest Christmas craze. Actually, simple pleasures. Yeah, I used to love playing those tennis ball games. Wonderful.
And there is a picture of these bees that they were studying.
Yes.
Presumably they were little, tiny... Oh, look. Now,
I mean, this is just the best thing.
the benefit of those listening on the radio, this bee is playing with a ball that's roughly the same size as the bee. And it is like the way we play, as you say, with beach balls or those exercise balls.
I'm impressed at how it does it.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it?
It's clearly getting something from it, isn't
You see, it's funny. I mean, they are not intelligent creatures as we see intelligence, but they are nevertheless sort of intelligent, aren't they? And they're very,
They
very
have a mass
structured.
intelligence, don't they?
A mass
Yeah, they're intelligent as a
Hive
horde,
intelligence,
yeah.
yes, it's like the Borg.
But I just think that's brilliant.
It's like the Borg.
But they
Birds, the bees and the
together
Borg.
they are an amazing unit, aren't they?
Yes,
And they achieve so much. But individually, that bee is really enjoying himself.
He's having a whale of a time.
Exactly, for no apparent reason other than just rolling it around. There's no point to it, there's no purpose, whereas bees have a purpose in their hive life to create the
And they're
honey
all doing it. They're all doing it.
Yeah.
But when you think of it, why are we so impressed with that? Because you look at lions on the plains, and the little baby lions are playing with their mums. They actually, and they're very playful with each other.
But there's a purpose to
I would
that,
say
isn't there?
yes.
It's a
What you're
hunting
learning.
training and all that sort of thing.
I don't think it's necessarily just impressed, but it's just joyous. I think it gives joy. And frankly, at the moment, let's give as much joy and get as much joy as we can.
Well, anyone who's got a pet knows a pet cat or dog or rabbit or whatever.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They love to be played with, and they get something real out of it, and they
absolutely.
smile at you for
But
it.
you also get something in return.
Yes,
I could
yeah.
spend hours watching the cats chasing each other around
Yeah.
for no other reason than just they're chasing each other around. But it's the most hysterical thing that you've
Yeah,
seen.
yeah.
And it just makes you feel so much better about life for that 5, 10, 15 minutes. I absolutely love it.
And if there was a bee on the... All those bees were joining in then. If there was one sat on the side not joining in, you know what they'd say to it?
Go on.
Resistance is futile.
No, of course they would, yes.
If you're
have to be
Star
a
Trek.
Star Trek not to know that one. Yeah.
There you go.
But we both are.
Give you that opportunity.
We talk Star Trek language sometimes.
Claire, Emma, it's been great to see you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Indeed.
Thank you for bringing us a smile, because
Just
they're
nice
rare
to
at the
see.
moment, aren't they?
Oh, tell me about it. It is 8:47. Let's bring you up to date with some of the headlines today. And the billionaire Elon Musk is now in charge of Twitter. He's ousted its top 3 executives in his first move. There he is, dancing in front of a Tesla. Mr. Musk says he was acquiring the platform because he thought it was important to have a space where a wide range of beliefs can be debated in a healthy manner. It's cost him, we think, £38 billion.
But he's got it. The railways in Scotland are going to stage a 24-hour walkout on Saturday, that's tomorrow, amid ongoing disputes over pay and conditions. ScotRail says the latest offer would have seen the lowest paid staff receive a basic pay increase of almost 7.5%. But the RMT's Scottish organiser says the latest increase falls short of where they need to be, with inflation sitting at 12.2%.
Here's a strange one for you. It's a brass-engraved die created to emboss the King's cipher on dispatch boxes that all those politicians have. It's first made on a machine and then hand-finished and hand-polished before it applies the gold leaf emboss of Charles' cipher to the boxes.
Now, in 2019, 21-year-old Libby Squire was brutally murdered after she became separated from friends on a night out.
Yeah, her mum, Lisa, has been campaigning for anti-violence ever since and has now decided to come face-to-face with her daughter's killer for a Sky crime series called Libby, Are You Home Yet?
And Lisa's here now to remind us of her daughter's legacy. Good morning, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
A lot of people will wonder why you're doing this. You obviously, your impulse is there, but what do you think you are achieving?
I don't know how Libby died, because the post-mortem couldn't ascertain how she died. And there's only one person who knows how she died, and that was him. So it's a need. I need to find out how she died and what happened to her in that time that she was with him.
But it could be even more painful for you. If that's even possible, it could be more painful.
There isn't anything more painful than being without her. And I know what happened that night, but when you don't have the exact facts, your mind takes you to really dark places, and my brain will fill in the spaces, and I just really would like to know.
Do you think he will tell you, or is it as we saw with people like the Moors murderers and things, they deliberately held information back to have power? Is he that type, do we think, or do you think he will actually tell you?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but I think he needs to have the opportunity to tell me. I think I'd be really naive if I think that on the first meeting he's going to say, I did this, and this happened. So
you'd have to be seriously compassionate and very, very sorry, wouldn't he,
yes,
to even give you
yes.
that level of honesty?
I don't think he
and you
is,
don't
yeah.
think that's going to
You
happen?
don't think it? I mean, you will have seen him in the court case.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, what impression did you get of him then?
He didn't really give anything out in court, and certainly
Could you even look at him?
Yes, I looked at him all the time, actually. I remember my family liaison officer said, you will stare at him for a good number of days, and then all of a sudden you'll think, oh, I'm bored of looking at you. And it was very true. But yes, he didn't show any remorse in court, and I'm sure he's not remorseful yet. But, I still feel that need to be there.
Do you think it might bring about some remorse? Well, I mean, because by having a conversation with you, by you sitting as close as this to him, it's going to bring to him a reality which perhaps even now he hasn't quite grasped.
Yes, because it makes Libby a real person rather than a something, because obviously he wasn't with her for very long, just a matter of 20 minutes, I think. So, yes, yes. So, yes, it will make it a reality, possibly, for him.
Do we know anything of his family? Because you're sitting in front of him and you're a mother, and he must have had a mother. He must have a mother.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something you might be able to bring out in him that he's never had to be faced with before.
Yes, and he wasn't a lot older than Libby, so we have I am probably old enough to be his mother. So yeah, possibly that will happen. I hope.
Have you had any advice on where to start, how to compose yourself, how to even go there?
No, not yet. Because we haven't got a date, you know, and he could still pull out at any time, which is...
And that's, of course, his power.
And that's his power, yes. And I have no say in that, but, you know, I won't give up if he does that. I'll try again another time.
So he has agreed at this stage
in principle, yes, he's agreed to see me. Yeah, but that's as far as it's got at the moment.
What are your family and friends telling you?
They're really split. My husband completely understands why I want to do it, but, you know, says...
He doesn't want to.
Oh, no. No, definitely not. My children are, you know, they're very... I don't think they really understand it, but, you know, they're young, so I don't expect them to. My friends, some say, oh, no, you definitely shouldn't do it, and others are like, yeah, go for it, you know, so...
Is there and there may well not be, and there's no criticism either way, but I've talked to mothers previously in some high-profile cases who have met the killers of their children, and they've had an element of forgiveness about them.
There is forgiveness does not come into it. I can't forgive someone for taking one of my children away from me. No. Never, ever. I've been quite public in saying I don't hate him, and I'm not angry with him because anger is not. I don't do anger very well, so I choose not to go down there. And I don't hate him mainly because I don't have any feelings towards him. I don't.
Well, actually, hate and bitterness, though, is very destructive to you.
Yes,
isn't it?
And I have a life to continue. I've got 3 other children, you know, and I've got to be, you know, as present as I can be. And I know hate and bitterness would take me down a very dark path, and I'm not prepared to go there.
Do you ever think, thank God for your 3 other children?
Oh, yeah.
Because without them, there would be very little reason to go
Absolutely.
on.
Yeah, they are the reason that I'm still here and keep going on. And, you know, and they are amazing. They are wonderful children. I'm really proud of them. And my husband and, you know, all my family are amazing. So I'm really...
I mean, it was a dreadful time you went through. I was particularly aware of it because my nephew was at Hull University at the time.
Oh, was he?
And had seen your daughter out and about as they all mingle and meet things. And that period of time when nobody knew what had happened, he found very difficult and his friends found very difficult. I can't imagine what you went through.
It was horrendous. I knew really from when I got the phone call to say that they didn't know where she was, that she was dead. I had that really strong inkling that that was the case. But you jump from that to having hope and then going back to not. And it was, I don't know, I actually can't think now how we got through that 48 days.
What was she like? Tell us about her.
She was so funny. She was everything she did with 100% conviction. You know, she was funny. She was a great big sister. She adored her siblings. She was a great friend. You know, a great, amazing daughter. I mean, she could be equally annoying as wonderful because she was a human being at the end of the day. But yeah, she's left a massive hole. But yeah, really loved by everybody. And she was just so, what you saw was what you got. You know, she was amazing. Is amazing.
And at that point where she was beginning to explore life on her own.
Yeah. I mean, she'd had a really difficult time in her mid-teens with her mental health, and then had got herself in a really good place and went to university and was absolutely flourishing. She was becoming the woman I always knew she could be. And
well, I suppose a lot of people have told you, don't let her be defined by her death. Remember her life.
Yes, absolutely.
And I suppose that's something you've got to concentrate on.
Absolutely. I think up until now we have been focusing on how she died and not how she lived, but that will come in time. There's lots to do still around her death, but yeah, I'm finding now I am beginning to think more about how she lived rather than how she died, which is...
Can you remember her with a smile as much as tears?
Yes, absolutely. You know, she just... I think about... I can be sat here just being quite upset, and then I think of something she did, and I would be laughing with, you know, tears would be rolling down my face from laughter, because she was so funny. You know, she was lovely.
Well, I do hope you find some peace with this extraordinary meeting that you probably have.
And some answers.
And some...
even if
at
I
least
get
a degree of peace.
Yes, just, you know...
Something.
Just to be able to say to her, I've tried really hard to find out what happened to you, is important to me.
Yeah, she'll know.
I'm sure. Lisa, pleasure talking to you.
And it really
Thank
is.
you very much
Thank you
indeed.
very much. Yeah, well done for your courage.
Thank you.
Hey, can you imagine?
My goodness.
Very tough. Well, look, we're going to take a short break. Back in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move. If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Prime Minister considers higher taxes and more public spending cuts as he tries to balance Britain's financial deficit.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Friday, the 28th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Wherever you are, you can take us with you. Here are your top stories this morning.
Rishi Sunak looking at raising taxes as a budget delay apparently saves the Treasury £15 billion. The Prime Minister also wants to implement sweeping spending cuts following some improvements in the economic picture.
The world's richest man, Elon Musk, has completed his takeover of the social media site Twitter. That brings to an end one of the most high-profile buyout sagas in recent history.
Northern Ireland facing a snap election after deadline talks failed to elect a new speaker and failed to break the political deadlock over the protocol.
And with Prince Harry's book, Spare, set for release, we'll take a deep dive into what to expect from the memoir, where he gives his account of events.
Love to hear from you this morning. Join in our discussion, why don't you? GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Well, Rishi Sunak's climate pledge has come under scrutiny after he decided to snub, or at least not go to, COP27, amid speculation that he could extend the windfall tax on energy companies.
Well, the PM and the Chancellor reportedly drawing up plans in the autumn budget around public spending cuts and tax increases worth up to £50 billion. And that's to fill a very large gap in the public finances.
And then, of course, this is all coming as climate activists and MPs have been urging him to go further on his windfall tax as oil and gas giants see their profits going up.
Well, let's talk to our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who's here in the studio. Morning to you.
Morning.
Look, this is a very big problem. It's a very big hole to fill. But he said in the summer during the hustings that tackling with it, balancing the books was going to be his priority. You shouldn't say he's acting on that now.
Yes, and he's been given even more impetus to act on it because over the last 3 months we've seen what happens when a Prime Minister and Chancellor sort of ignore, if we can put it like that, the state of the books. So I think he'll be very, very focused on that. I think we should take that 50 billion figure with a little pinch of salt because, of course, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister at this stage before the budget are in expectation management mode, and they will be making huge sweeping cuts. But from the sound of the FT piece, it sounds a bit as though they won't be implementing those £50 billion worth of cuts in full. I think that the problem Rishi Sunak faces now is most of the low-hanging fruit has already been picked. It's been compared to Osborne's austerity budget, but in many ways it's going to be worse because then things were more bloated than they are now. And I think what's politically very interesting about this is Labour is planning to force a vote on every single measure in the fiscal event. So if you remember that fracking catastrophe a couple of weeks ago, that was because Labour pushed through a vote on fracking and MPs didn't want to sign up to removing the pledge, removing them ban on fracking because they knew their constituents wouldn't like it. Well, now imagine you've got Labour pushing through a vote on cutting health spending, on cutting defence spending, on cutting education spending. I don't think that's going to go down particularly well with Tory MPs. So that sort of party unity we've seen over the last few days could turn out to be rather shallower than it looks.
I mean, the last budget, which caused all the problem, the mini-budget, didn't have to go through the Office of Budget Responsibility, the OBR. The next one will it?
The next one will. I think it was decided that it was a mistake not to put it through the OBR because that's what panicked the markets. I mean, there are many people who say that the OBR is a bit silly, really. It was only invented sort of 15 years ago and now it's treated like God's word. But it is certainly true that the markets felt as though the Chancellor was acting with no proper data, with no information and was just sort of going rogue. So I think this will go through the OBR. The OBR forecasts, we know that they're improving a little bit. Sunak's becoming Prime Minister has settled the markets a bit, plus the price of gas is going down a little bit. The interest rates on our debt are going down a bit. So the situation isn't looking quite as grave as it was a couple of weeks ago, but there is still a very big hole to fill. And he's almost certainly promised this morning, from reading between the lines of what Nadhim Zahawi said, he'll be sticking with the triple lock, which makes it even more difficult to make other cuts. So expect to see big cuts across important departments, which will go down very badly with local MPs.
Isn't there sort of more fat, if you like, in the areas that don't affect us as members of the public? You know, you've got Quangos, you've got the civil service, all these areas which, I mean, they're not going to like it, and it's bad news for those individual people, but it's not going to affect our local services in the same direct way.
Yes, I think there's definitely this government, the one before it, and even Boris Johnson's government too, were very keen on trimming the fat in the sort of bloated civil service. And I was speaking to civil servants last night who said that already there's been a hiring freeze in plenty of departments across the board, which will definitely help. But it's not enough. And without, I mean, changes to the triple lock is what could massively fix this crisis. That pensions are by far the biggest area of spending, but politically very, very difficult. And it looks like Rishi Sunak isn't going to do that. Apart from that, I mean, obviously we've got this enormous NHS backlog and you've got NHS leaders saying that what we need is more and more investment. There are lots of people on the right tend to be on the right of the Conservative Party, who think that proper, robust NHS reform could actually save lots and lots of money.
There's an awful lot of money wasted.
A lot of money wasted and not much joined-up thinking going on there. But again, politically very difficult. The NHS has been a sort of political football for so long that for Rishi Sunak to stand up on week 2 and say, no, we're not going to put any money into more money into the black hole of the NHS, we're going to reform it, shake it up, would probably go down pretty badly, strangely, in Parliament.
Because it's not. It would. I mean, it's not even a quick fix. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I mean, a lot of people would say it needs root and branch reform, but it would actually take years to complete.
Yes, that's long.
It would take years, and obviously the Conservatives are very far behind in the polls at the moment. They'll be looking for quick wins that can get them some votes before the next election. So it looks like NHS reform is basically off the table, serious NHS reform, and the triple lock is off the table.
And what about the military? Because we've already heard, haven't we, that it would cause serious resignations if the military budget is cut.
Well, as far as I understand, they've reached some sort of a compromise. So it might not be 3% of defence spending, which is what Ben Wallace said was his red line for staying in government, 3% of GDP on defence spending. But it will increase a bit until 2026, when they're planning to put it up more. But these figures are so far in the future that it gets a bit ridiculous.
What about windfall tax?
Oh, yeah.
Windfall tax. Yes, Rishi Sunak has decided to, well, again, not quite certain, but from everything that's going around, it sounds as though Rishi Sunak is going to extend the windfall tax on these big oil and gas companies. He's decided, looking at the figures, that it hasn't, that the worry was that it was going to prevent investment from these big companies into drilling projects, etc. But looking at the figures, it doesn't look like it is having that effect. So he's much more relaxed about extending that windfall tax or possibly raising it to 25%.
Because Labour have always sort of, I mean, they want the windfall tax, but they've always sort of said it's the financial solution to everything. So it seems.
So it does feel a bit as though Rishi Sunak is stealing Keir Starmer's clothes here, because if he does extend the windfall tax and do it, you know, in quite a dramatic way, quite a drastic way, it sounds like, it's quite hard to know what Labour are going to say, because at every point so far, Labour have said, no, we wouldn't cut health spending, we wouldn't cut defence spending, we wouldn't cut education spending, we'd just raise the windfall tax. And if Sunak's already going to do that, and there's still a big black hole in public finances, that makes it a little bit trickier for Labour.
But you still think that even if this next budget is OBR approved, they're going to try and force a debate on every single step? Gosh,
so I gather.
Really go through this again.
So I gather, yes. And I think that's what we've got to expect, because, of course, the Opposition Day motion on the fracking ban was extraordinarily successful. That's a sort of parliamentary instrument, they call it. And it's a clever little trick by Labour. And it works so well that you sort of wonder, why would they not do it again?
But isn't there a sense with that, because it's being covered and because we're all becoming more aware of these things, isn't the general public at least have the potential to turn on Labour and say, you're stopping us sorting out some of these problems?
I think being optimistic about how much the majority of people are tuned in, you'll get big news watchers thinking, oh, this is a little trick that they played, like the fracking trick last time. But if, as most people, you have a busy job and politics isn't your main interest, you just turn on the 6 o'clock news in the evening or whatever and see Conservatives voting for cutting defence spending, cutting health spending, cutting education spending, those will be the headlines. And that's what people will take in.
Oh, it's a dirty game, isn't it?
Dirty, dirty game.
Yeah. Olivia, thank you very much indeed.
OK, at 10 minutes, nearly 11 minutes past 9, let's bring you up to date with those headlines. And Northern Ireland is on course for a pre-Christmas Assembly election as the deadline to restore the devolved government at Stormont passed overnight. The Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris must now call for an election to be held within 12 weeks. The DUP, as we know, is blocking the restoration of power sharing in its protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol.
A new analysis of nurses' pay shows they work the equivalent of 1 day a week for free. Researchers from London Economics found that in real terms, the salary of an experienced nurse has fallen by a fifth.
New research shows the abuse of customer service staff has hit record levels amid frustrations over the cost of living crisis. Almost half of frontline service staff have experienced hostility from customers in the past 6 months. More than 50% experienced verbal abuse, including swearing and shouting, and more than a quarter had experienced physical abuse.
And the Royal Mint has started producing the first coins featuring the King. The move, transitioning from the Queen to her son, represents the biggest change to UK coins since decimalisation. The 27 billion coins currently in circulation will, of course, as you know, remain legal tender.
And one man who probably hasn't seen a coin in years is the world's richest man, Elon Musk. He is now closed. Well, if you own...
He's probably got... Do you remember that... What's that cartoon where there's the very rich duck and he used to dive into a pool of coins? Do you remember? You remember that one?
No.
What's it called?
Don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
But if you're as rich as Elon Musk, when was the last time you ever held a coin or had coins in your pocket? Maybe I'm wrong, maybe he does. Anyway, he's just bought Twitter, hasn't he? For a jaw-dropping $44 billion, I think.
Yeah, 38 billion pounds,
That's right.
wasn't it? Is that right?
I think that's right.
Anyway, it's been one of the most dramatic buyout dramas ever witnessed in tech. Shockingly, when the billionaire took over Twitter yesterday, the first thing he did was to fire the chief executive as well as the chief financial officer.
Yeah, but then he went into work carrying the kitchen sink, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Which was, he was making some sort of statement about he'd bought everything plus the kitchen sink. Anyway, something like that. For more, let's go to our national reporter, Theo Chikomba. And there he is.
Yes, that's
so
right. Good
tell
morning.
us the
You are
latest
talking
gossip.
about... Yeah.
Theo, tell us the latest gossip then on the Twitter takeover. Why should we care?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You were mentioning the price there, $44 billion, around £38 billion. And this saga has gone on for a while. Started back in January when Elon Musk bought some shares in the company, and by April he was the majority stakeholder. And after that he started having meetings with those on the board, and there was some friction times during that time. And of course we are where we are here today. But in July he almost wanted to do a U-turn, but it didn't quite work because he got so far into the negotiations that say by law he can't go back. But what does this mean for the average person? Well, Elon Musk has criticised Twitter in the past, saying their policies are too strict and maybe holding back some voices which were on Twitter and some which still are. And at the moment, you know, people have been saying some political figures, maybe some who might be called divisive, haven't been allowed to voice their opinion. And interestingly, in a couple of weeks' time in the US, there's going to be midterm elections, and people have been talking about what this will mean, what kind of people are going to be allowed back on Twitter, and whether he's going to implement what he thinks is, or he says, is a more free platform for people to go on, whether he'll implement that straight away. But in terms of going forward, we're not too sure yet. People have been saying, well, this is going to be huge, and others saying, well, this is going to cause chaos. Conservatives in America have said that the company in the past criticising them, saying it's not allowing them to say what they want to say, saying they're liberals, holding them back and curtailing them, you know, having freedom of speech. But Twitter at the time denied, saying that is not the case. Well, what's going on forward from here? We are, of course, just behind me over my right shoulder, we're at the Twitter UK office, and I'm sure many of those staff here will be thinking what happens next. As we've already seen overnight, a number of senior executives have been taken away.
OK, Theo, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's talk to the Deputy Director of the Free Speech Union, Ben Jones, who joins us now. Ben, morning to you. Look, is this a victory for free speech, or does this raise concerns about the possibility of sort of increased hate speech? I mean, it's a very fine line, isn't it?
Good morning. Our hope would be that the Musk takeover will herald a new age of free speech on Twitter. Who knows if he will succeed or not, but I think his ambition is the right one. The problem as we sit at the Free Speech Union is the censorship that is absolutely rampant across social media platforms from big tech. And aside from American conservatives being censored, what we have in our inbox day after day tends to be gender-critical feminists, women who don't agree with trans ideology, who are being censored, banned, suspended, kicked off various platforms for saying pretty innocuous things. So that's the type of casework that we deal with most of the time. And we would hope that with Musk in charge, that women and men will be free to express their views on all sides of that debate without fear of being arbitrarily censored.
Does this deal actually make him one of the biggest, if not the biggest, publishers in the world?
Potentially. I mean, there is this long-running argument about whether Twitter is a publisher or not, or just a platform. I think he would see Twitter as being a public square. And I see this morning that he's spoken about the importance of having a shared public square where people of all sorts of political views and philosophies can come together. And interestingly, he spoke about the danger of both the left and the right splitting off to their own social media platforms. Former President Trump has set up his own social media platform. And the loss of the engagement between both sides in political debates and the harm that does to society. So I think it's very important that you go through day-to-day life encountering people with different perspectives and that you get along with people. And I think there's not enough of that. And I think we do need a unified public square. And in today's day and age, Twitter is a big part of that.
Well, yeah, and look, there are some very sensible things in what he's said, which I know the Free Speech Union sort of really pushes for, and it's the idea of hearing, having a free voice, being able to say what you think, but hearing all sides, because that then moderates our behaviour, doesn't it? It can change our own viewpoints. The problem with something like Twitter, though, which makes it quite problematic, is that it tends to become an echo chamber. People only hear the voices or follow the voices that they themselves agree with.
I think that is a danger, but I think it's a bigger problem if Twitter decides that it will only broadcast and air the views of people who agree with California tech companies and their employees. And if you have a climate like that, which arguably is what's been going on for the last few years, certainly, that you will have the splintering of the public square into rival social media platforms, and the right will go off to a right-wing social network and the left or the progressive side of politics will stay on Twitter, and those sides will not be engaging with each other. So I think that would be the bigger danger. I also think it's important perhaps to take a broader view about this. I mean, to have some sense of perspective, most people in Britain aren't on Twitter and never will be. So I think it's important to address why this matters for those people. So if you're watching this and you have no interest in Twitter whatsoever, I think there is a bigger problem, and I think the Elon Musk takeover is part of a fight back against the idea that big tech companies in California have the right to determine what British subjects can think or say. And we've seen this recently at the Free Speech Union with PayPal, who suspended our account. We forced them to backtrack. It's been reinstated. But we are in a world now where if your financial service provider doesn't like your political views, you can have your account cancelled. And we've seen that again this week with the barrister Sarah Phillimore, who was hosting a book launch via Eventbrite. And they've pulled the listing because they just don't happen to like her views about the gender debate and about the debate about women's rights and trans issues. So I think the Twitter takeover is an important fight back against that prevailing climate. And I think there is a bigger issue that is of interest to people who aren't on Twitter and who never will be.
OK, Ben, good to talk to you.
Thank you
very much.
A lot of people online can't get their head around why he walked into the headquarters with a sink. But apparently he did post a video, I think that's where we've got the footage from, actually, on Twitter with the caption saying, "I'm entering Twitter headquarters, let that sink in." Very funny.
Hilarious.
He's a slightly peculiar man, Elon.
Yeah, well, yes, I think he is, really. Anyway, look, we're going to head to a break because we've got to squeeze in Prince Harry's memoir in just a couple of minutes. We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It is 9:24. Prince Harry's book is coming out then in January, and it's called Spare.
Yeah.
Bit loaded, isn't it?
Very loaded, because of course it harks back to the heir and the spare, and he obviously still feels he's spare.
Let's talk to our oil reporter, Cameron Walker, who's here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, this is quite something, isn't it?
It certainly is. I think he's definitely an attempt to say he's still in the shadow, perhaps, of his older brother, Prince William, who will one day be king. But I think also the blurb was very interesting, talking about him and his brother having to walk behind his mother's coffin and how he must have felt. Now, this sounds like a big revelation. It's actually not, because he's spoken about it before. In 2017, he did an interview with Newsweek where he said no child should be put in that position. So perhaps we're going to see more detail as to exactly the process and the decision-making of the palace to make William and Harry walk behind his mother's coffin and the feelings of the two brothers. So perhaps an uncomfortable time for the royal family. But of course, in that scenario, Prince Philip was very comforting and said to Prince William, if you walk, I'll walk with you. So clearly quite a comforting grandfather for Prince William, and he's going to be recording the audiobook himself.
Yes, that's interesting. But at the Buckingham Palace, or at least lots of sources, are saying that this book is going to be raw, it's going to hit hard at people, all sorts of people are going to be hit by it. So they're really warning of this sort of impending storm.
Yeah, and I think that's the worry within the royal household. The problem is they don't know what Prince Harry is going to say. And if you look back to the Oprah interview in 2021, where he accused Prince Charles, now King Charles, of course, financially cutting him off, Meghan accused an unnamed member of the royal family of racism, which forced the palace and the Queen to put that statement out, saying recollections may vary. And I think that's the worry within the royal household. They are going to see it at the same time as everybody else are going to have to work out exactly what accusations, if any, of course, are now in the public domain and how best to respond.
Oh, it's going to be a very difficult time. Cameron, thank you very much indeed. What do you think?
The point is, will you buy it? I think everybody will. Worldwide bestseller, that's what they say.
Worldwide. America will be very big. Not for me, I've got to say. That's it from us. We'll see you at 6 tomorrow. Emily Carver's here next.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world.